31. Dylan. Disbelief, sorrow, and betrayal were just a few of the emotions running through me that were causing me pain. I'm shaking all over, but I'm not sure if it's from the crying of the shock of the past few minutes. The tears that rolled down my face and into my mouth were warm and salty, and they made my stomach ache. I knew that someone was carrying me in their arms, and even though I was fully aware of my nudity, I didn't have it in me to feel ashamed. Lesia's voice penetrated the haze in my mind, and I could tell that she was very close, but I couldn't figure out how to open my eyes and see anything around me. The arms around me were strong and steady and uncomfortably warm. In my head I knew it had to be one of Lesia's brothers, but I truly didn't care which one it was. A vicious storm was raging inside of me, and when Ray tried to mutter to me, my mind wouldn't grasp what she was saying. Breaking down was the only thing that I could do. That was the only thing that no one had taken from me. Curling into myself further than I already was felt good. It felt as if I could hold all of the broken pieces of myself together for just a little longer. The heat that I felt on my back, my arms, and under my knees seemed to be increasing to the point it was starting to feel uncomfortable. Run faster. The rain is making her cold. I can feel her body temperature dropping. A voice said much closer to my head than I liked. Was it raining? I couldn't even tell, but it felt poetic in a way. That the world and all who lived in it should feel just a fraction of the storm brewing inside me. That is what they deserved. What he deserved. As soon as the thought echoed in my mind, a pain shot through my heart and I briefly heard the clap of thunder in the distance. Regardless of all the things I had been through in my life, I had been able to build a life for myself. Creating a safe place where I could exist outside of the pack who despised me. When Lesia and her brothers had entered my life, I was hesitant of what might happen, but they brought me joy and happiness that I thought I would never experience. Pieces of me were glued and strengthened with each experience and memory that they helped to create. Others may not have seen the changes I felt, but I felt them. I saw them in myself and I heard them from Ray. Aaron is the one I had reservations about, but if he was really that close with the twins, then maybe he could help to rewrite his place in my life and his own impact there. How stupid I must seem to him to have been so gullible to let him get close to me just so that I would let my guard down around him. I had fallen for his trick so willingly because what? He had been kind a time or two. That didn't replace all of the countless times he had been an absolute terror to me. All of the times that I had felt something for him started to flash in my mind. The sorrow at his parents being dead, the worry about the scars on his body, the desire when I saw him naked in the woods. Desire. That was the worst of them all. To know that I had betrayed myself. I had let his looks, his pretty words, and his false shows of kindness make me see him as something other than what he truly was. Not realizing that the rhythm of my bearer's strides was lulling me into a sense of comfort, I let everything that had been bottled up inside of me come to the top and overflow until I had wrung myself out and was slipping into nothingness. But the bliss of oblivion didn't last long because I was suddenly aroused by banging, screams, and slurred curses. What are you even going to do? How could he let them do that to her? What if there was a reason for this, for all of this? Are you f***ing stupid? Do you think that there's any excuse for what she just went through, for everything that she has ever gone through? Voices getting louder and louder are causing a pressure behind my eyes to increase and pulse in a way that I knew would not let me fall back to sleep. My body felt heavy as I tried to move towards the voices that kept getting louder and louder. Slowly, I realized that I was on the couch in my living room, so I moved carefully because I briefly remembered that I had previously been naked. Cool damp strands of hair fell in my face as I slowly turned my head to the side. Wrapped in the soft quilt from my bed, I pulled it tighter around me as I wriggled like a little worm to face the people in my living room. As the soft cotton blanket rubbed against certain sensitive areas of my body, I became keenly aware that I was still naked, so I made sure that my wriggling didn't uncover any parts other than my feet and arms. Even though I was moving very slowly and carefully, I had apparently made enough noise to get the attention of my guests. Oh gods, Dylan, you're awake, Lesia yelled as she ran across the room and practically threw herself on top of me. When her body collided with mine, I flinched at the burst of pain that radiated throughout my entire body. Lesia pulled away quickly. Gods, I'm so sorry. I'm such an idiot. Reaching out, I grabbed her arm to stop her from moving too far away. No, don't be sorry. I'm a bit sore, but... I pulled her closer and whispered, I'm naked under this. Realization must have set in because I watched her face shift from apologetic to understanding. It's completely fine, Dylan. We're totally used to this kind of thing. Looking past her to where Nico and Cruz stood almost fully across the living room, and seeing how they were actively avoiding my gaze made me think that they might not be as comfortable as she thought. Would you guys mind if I go wash up really quick? I asked to the three of them as a whole, but Lesia was the only one who responded. Of course. Do you need some help getting up? She asked as she slowly helped me get up off the couch while keeping all my unmentionables nice and covered. Finally in my room, I grabbed some clothes out of the closet and jumped in the shower. My hair was wet enough that I knew someone had tried washing out the pasta and sauce, but I could still feel and smell the food that was in it. Standing in the middle of the shower, I adjusted the head so that I was standing directly under the flow of the near scalding water. Wanting to wash away everything that happened is all I could think about. Ray seemed hesitant to speak to me and I knew why, but I was not going to beg her if she wasn't going to apologize to me. Ignoring her thoughts, I washed my hair twice and then jumped out to get dressed in a pair of oversized sweats and a long-sleeve tee. The steam of the shower puffed out of the door when I opened it and for a moment it made me giggle, but as I walked past the mirror on my dresser I saw the swelling in my face and I watched the smile melt away before my eyes. For a moment I didn't want to walk out of this room because in here I was safe from everything and everyone. Here I didn't have to recall what had happened today and how I had been completely fooled by Aaron. Pressure built up behind my eyes and I knew that if I didn't try to think about something else I was going to end up bawling my eyes out again. I took the towel off my head and let my wet hair fall down my neck and back. Staring at the pitiful girl in the mirror made me feel so uncomfortable because as she stared back at me there was nothing about her that I liked. A soft knock on my door pulled me out of my thoughts and I immediately jumped up and practically pulled the door off its hinges in my haste to open it. "Hey Dylan, I just wanted to make sure that you were okay," Lesia said as she leaned against the doorframe. Was I okay? I thought to myself, and Ray was about to say something, but I immediately shut down our connection. I didn't need her empty words of reassurance if she wasn't going to explain to me what happened earlier. "Yeah, I'm totally good," I said as I pushed my way past her into the hall. I could hear the twins in my kitchen and I was eager to see what they were doing. To my surprise, they had already whipped together some soup and sandwiches. When they saw me walk in, Nico rushed over and wrapped me up in a big hug before asking, "Are you okay with hugs?" Having his big arms wrapped around me felt oddly comforting, but I suddenly remembered that it had been one of them who carried me here while I had been completely naked. When he finally let go of me, I saw the genuine concern from Lesia's face reflected on his own. This close, I could see that the green of his eyes had little gold flecks in it, and that there was a slight dusting of freckles that played across his nose and cheeks. I leaned in and squeezed him again quickly before letting him go. This type of closeness was foreign to me, but I relished it. So many times I wished that Ray could hold me in her arms when it was just the two of us. Pushing myself away, I saw that Cruz stood close to the table just watching us. The look in his eyes was both similar to his siblings, but held something else. Something that I was very familiar with. Guilt. Nico wrapped his arm around my shoulders as he stepped to the side and Lesia grabbed my opposite hand as if they were afraid if they didn't walk me to the table I somehow wouldn't make it there. The food on the table was simple, but it was one of my absolute favorites. The smell of tomato soup filled my nose and made my stomach growl. There were 4 large bowls filled to the brim and in the center of the little table, there was a plate piled high with grilled cheese sandwiches and a small bowl with shredded cheese beside it. I couldn't stop the tears that filled my eyes, but I dug my fingernails deep into the palm of my hand to try to keep them there. No one had ever been kind to me like this, but here they were. At first I had been embarrassed to see them after what happened back at school, but now I knew that it was silly of me to have let those thoughts enter my mind. Before I thought too hard about it, I shook my head slightly as if I was shaking off the pressure of my own thoughts, and smiled up at Cruz. He was still standing on the opposite end of the table, but he returned the smile I gave him. "Thank you," I said as I stared at him. For a moment he just stared right back before turning his head to the side and looking away saying, "You shouldn't thank me." I had been about to question him when Nico released my shoulders and pulled out the chair in front of me. Lesia sat to my right and pulled her chair a little closer to me because she was still holding my right hand. "Are you going to let her go so that she can eat? Or do you think she can't do that on her own either?" Cruz barked at her. "What is your problem?" she yelled. "Don't act like you're not just as worried about her as I am." Cruz was still standing there looking off into the kitchen, but when I glanced at Nico I saw the slight shimmer there and I knew that he was probably speaking to Cruz even if I couldn't see his eyes. The tension in the air was palpable and even though I have been in the middle of their sibling arguments, I wasn't in the mood to deal with one right now. "Thank you for carrying me home," I said to Cruz as I felt the heat flare in my cheeks. He turned to look at Somi so fast that I knew I was right by the pink that filled his cheeks as well. "How did you know it was me?" he asked surprised. "Well, I was just guessing because Nico's arms felt a little different when he had grabbed me up into that hug a moment ago, but his response confirmed my suspicions. "It's only because he got to you first," Nico grumbled with obvious annoyance and I had to admit it was really cute. Lesia rolled her eyes next to me and finally let go of my hand as she reached out to grab me a sandwich and scoot the bowl of cheese over to me. "Can you idiots stop trying to play the hero and just sit down and eat?" Watching the way that Lesia handled her brothers always amazed me. Even though they were younger than her, they were both bigger than her in height and sheer mass, but she acted like they were mere toddlers. Cruz finally sat down and the 4 of us started eating. I wasn't sure if it was the food or everything that I had gone through earlier, but I ate the entire bowl and 3 sandwiches before I realized that they were all staring at me. "What?" I said as I put the last bite of the sandwich I had used to sop up the remnants of the soup that were sitting at the bottom of my bowl. The toasted buttery bread had left my fingers feeling greasy and I hadn't even realized that I had thrown each finger in my mouth and licked each one quickly to remove the butter goodness. Shyness filled me as I realized what I must have looked like to them. Quickly I looked at each of their faces. Lesia looked pleased, Nico looked impressed, but Cruz's expression was something different. When our eyes met, I watched as color filled his cheeks again and he quickly looked away. Odd, but I immediately smiled and was about to thank them for the food when there was a loud banging on my front door. All 4 of us immediately turned to the door, and while I had shut down the connection with Ray I could sense that she was angry. Angry at me, at herself, but especially angry about whoever it was outside. "Who would come here?" Nico and Cruz asked at the exact same time, but this time I didn't laugh, I only looked between them with as much confusion as I felt. "No one. No one ever comes here besides you 3, but as the words came out I remembered then who else comes here and the dread I felt at his presence must have shown on my face because both of them looked furious. "Who Dylan?" Lesia asked softly. The knocking came again, but much harder this time, and I almost wished I hadn't eaten so much because I was sure that I was about to throw it all up as I spoke his name. Alpha Rogan. 32. Rogan. I had been sitting in my office for a little over an hour, but I had heard from VIT and 2 of my other guards that Noel had taken Aaron to get cleaned up and gotten him off to school. Zane chuckled softly in my head at the pleasure he got from recalling all of the things I had let him do to Aaron these past days. I smiled at his ignorance. He may be the beast, but I am the true monster. I am the one to be feared. VIT had been back and forth from the pack to the city multiple times over the past few weeks, so I was surprised that he had made to follow Aaron this morning, but VIT had always been one of my most valuable assets. Things haven't turned out the way I planned, so I ended up taking out my pent-up anger out when I shouldn't have, but it's not like there was anything that anyone could do about it. I'm the alpha of this F***ing pack, ruler uncontested. These fools should be glad that I'm here. Without me they would have ended up falling into the hands of a weak fool. Supernatural beings are far superior to humans, and we were not meant to mingle with them. They were meant to fear us as they fear the God that created them. Our gods are even superior to theirs. But even the gods aren't infallible. Just because they blessed a creature with superior strength, skill, or even magic doesn't mean they turn out the way the gods wished. They gave us too many choices that could lead us off track. My mind was wondering more and more these days, recalling the things I had to do to get here and the things that are still in the works and all the ways that those plans can be altered. Frustration was my constant companion lately. I was surrounded by incompetent and inferior wolves who could not find the being who had been coming onto my lands. The land and all who lived on it were mine to command, and whoever thought that I would forgive this was gravely mistaken. I intend to find them, figure out what it is that they want, and then leave their dead body for all others to see. Death is a constant companion in a wolf pack. We kill friends, enemies, and anyone who can't fall in line if need be. That is just the way things work. Mark had informed me that whoever got on our lands has been aided with magic, and even though it points to the Fae, I have a feeling that they are just trying to throw me off their scent. Fae are sneaky creatures, but after so many years of intermingling with humans their power struggles have practically disappeared. There are those who live in the Fae realms, and then those who live among humans with little in between. Wolves on the other hand are just as vicious as they have always been, if not more so. I blame it on the way that the world around us grows and advances, so must our ferocity in being better than humans. Lost in thought as I missed the first message that had come in on my phone, so when the second one came in, it didn't immediately make sense. A few things were going through my mind as I tried to understand the message. Why would someone bother texting me if they could easily link me? But when I realized who had sent the message, all distractions were put aside. He would prefer this Friday if at all possible. I went to the previous message to try to understand what was going on. It was clear that it was from Xavier, but not what he needed. Good morning, Rogan. Mr. Winters would like to set up a meeting with you this week if you are free. Please let me know what works for you. Anger replaced my previously smug mood. How dare he speak of that boy with such formality and offer me none in return? Even if he didn't know what I was, the fact that the boy knew who I was, in his world at least, should let him know I am someone to be respected. Sending my response brightened my mood a bit, but it also made me realize that I may not be showing quite enough of a presence in the human world to be considered the formidable contender that I am. I resolved to rectify that immediately and started thinking of how I wish it had been Gabriel or Rowan, whichever F***ing name he wanted to be called, in my basement. I would personally wipe that smug a smile right off his face before I had him begging for death. The thought filled me with immense pleasure, and Zane hummed at the thought of me letting him out to do as he pleased again. I didn't care which of us it was who brought him to his knees as long as he learned his place. VIT linked me suddenly. Sir, there seems to be some kind of commotion going on in the school. Do you wish me to go inside? Now this is what obedience looks like. I was pleased by both his request, and the fact that it seemed Aaron had followed instructions after all. I have waited much too long for the time when I could rid myself of him, but with no male heir, I had to keep him close for now, even if I never intended to hand anything over to him or anyone else for that matter. Dylan, on the other hand, was another story. I needed her, more than I needed an heir if I was being honest, but no one knew her value and I intended to keep it that way. If that bastard had done his job and played his role right, she would have stayed secluded and all alone until the time to act was at hand. Instead, he couldn't even succeed in keeping her away from the others when I had made it so easy for him. Responding to VIT, I instructed, stay close by, but do not enter the school. Find someone inside to update you. I'm sure you won't be able to reach Aaron. I was almost sure his wolf was still sedated from all that elixir he had been given. Mark has done a magnificent job creating such things, and I was impressed with his ability to use magic in such ways. I've had my doubts about him at times, but I am sure his latest contributions are proof of his decision to side with me. Harper linked me and let me know that he was heading home. I had sent him on a mission to investigate Xavier, as he was most well versed among my men with the human world behind VIT, and he was already working on something. Alpha, I will be there within the next few hours. I was able to obtain little information on the subject though. We can discuss at your convenience. He was always short and to the point. Before I had a moment to consider responding to him with a time and place to meet, Noel and VIT linked at the same time. Alpha, there has been an incident at the school involving Dylan. Sir, the Silvera boys and girl are leaving the premises with Dylan and she seems to be incapacitated. Well, Aaron must have been scared sh**tlis from what he endured to not wait another moment to make his move. Too bad that he let those dem pups get involved. I was hesitant to let that little b***tch get close to Dylan, but with everything going on, it seemed too much trouble to get rid of her and deal with her parents. Had I known that those twin bastards would get involved with her as well, I would have put a stop to it sooner. It was my fault for being lax in my supervision of things, but I guess I will have to rectify that situation sooner than later. Zane was finally paying attention to what was going on and seemed ready to begin planning what we would do to finally rid ourselves of the Silvera involvement. Their father has never fallen into line but was too important to dispose of. Well, he should have warned his children to be better aware of who they surround themselves with because it can sometimes determine your fate for better or worse. I was already heading for the door when Noel burst into my office carrying a half-dead Aaron, and Zane sneered at his insolence. Who did he think that he was to burst into my office unannounced? Sir, he huffed as he stood there cradling Aaron like he was a helpless child. He needs help. Once I looked at Aaron a bit closer, I could see that he looked in much worse condition than he was when I left him this morning. There were bruises on his face that I knew had not been there before, and he was bleeding from his nose and mouth. Had Dylan done this to him? I considered it for a moment, but I knew that this had to be done by someone else. Aaron was in a weakened state, but he was much stronger than her still. Even though he had burst into my office, Noel just stood there, motionless as if finally waiting for permission on what he should do with the boy. I saw him glance over to my couch and then back at me. There was no way that I was about to let him put that boy there. Take him with us to the car and I'll summon Mark, I instructed. Walking past him, I made my way outside and touched the bracelet on my hand to call Mark to my location. Soft groans were coming from Aaron, but all they did was grate on my nerves. By the time I got to the car, VIT was already in the driver's seat and Noel was hoisting Aaron into the back seat. Mark called my cell before I could inform VIT on where we would be going. He stated that he was working on something extremely pressing and that if I needed Aaron looked at I would have to take him to his lab. While Aaron had been there before, most times he was too unaware of his surrounding to pay attention to the things in there. Since I've never used that specific drug on Aaron before, I figured that I wouldn't chance something happening to him just in case his body couldn't heal without Dane. VIT had heard the conversation I had with Mark and was already heading to his location before I had to say anything. This is why VIT was so valuable. When Noel had finally taken Aaron inside, I stayed outside to speak to VIT about what he had learned from his last trip. Apparently there has been quite a bit of people coming to Aspen's corporate office, but also to the personal residence of Rowan Winters, which he rarely visited himself. VIT refused to call him by his given name, so I guess I would follow suit. He was still looking into most of the individuals and had no solid leads on any of them. Annoyed as I was, I trusted that he would find out what I needed to know soon. I decided that since we were here, I would check to see how Mark was coming along with the tracking spell. Walking into the lab, I saw Aaron laying in the first room being administered a healing spell by Mark, but it wasn't working as well as it should be. Intrigued, I went in to witness the progress for myself. Mark's eyes were squinted as he mumbled his incantation over Aaron's body, but the skin didn't knit itself together the way it should. Mark looked at me in disbelief. I do not know why his body is not healing, he said shakily. For a moment I could see the fear in Mark's eyes and I wondered if it was fear that his magic wasn't working, or that I would find him useless. I enjoyed his fear way too much, but I had mercy on him, something I would not give anyone else unless I truly needed them. It may be due to the drug I gave him while he was in the basement, do not be too concerned. Well, then would you mind leaving him here so that I can try to heal him once the toxin has had more time to leave his bloodstream? He asked anxiously. Noel was still standing in the room with us, but he hadn't taken his eyes off of Aaron. I've noticed their connection, but this is the first time that he has ever overstepped his bounds and I was not pleased, but he could deal with him if he wanted. Fine, keep the boy, but once he is healed send him back to the house. His aunt will worry if she doesn't see him soon, I instructed to both of them at once. When I left the building, VIT was no longer sitting in the truck. Would you like to leave the vehicle for Noel to deal with Aaron when they are done? He asked stiffly. VIT was always one step ahead and I enjoyed the fact that I didn't always have to have the answers. Yes, let's go. I need to go and see what happened with Dylan before it gets much later. I have to have a meeting with Harper when he returns, I tell him as I start walking off towards to the woods that lead to Dylan's house. Once there, I undress and quickly put my clothes in the bag that VIT has. Once we shift, Zane sniffs the area to make sure that there are no signs of intruders. It seems odd that we had so many breaches for them to all stop so suddenly, but if they found out that we had a way to track them it would be understandable that they stopped whatever it was they were planning. As we neared Dylan's house I picked up the scent of 3 others and immediately Zane wanted to rush in and annihilate them. Calm down, I told him as we neared the edge of the wooded area. VIT had already shifted and was handing me my clothes. I dressed, but instructed him to stay back for a bit. I had to figure out exactly what happened to determine how to play this and I didn't want him to give the impression that this was not a sympathetic visit. As I approached, I contemplated how I was going to get rid of the Silveras in the easiest way possible. The boys were still too young to send off Packlands and the girl was already so intertwined with Dylan, it would be hard to separate them. Playing the concerned alpha would probably be the easiest role to fall into and was the one I decided to portray when I finally walked up to the house and knocked. To my surprise Dylan didn't answer immediately. As annoyance started to turn into anger, I knocked again, harder this time. And if she didn't open in the next few moments, I would be damned if I didn't just let myself in that f***ing house. To my displeasure, the person who answered the door was not Dylan. Instead, it was both of the Silvera boys, and neither of them looked at all happy to see their alpha. 33. Dylan. What do you mean? The alpha, Alpha Rogan, comes here. Again, the both of them asked in unison. I really should be used to this by now, but at the moment, I'm not able to focus on their little quirk. I tried to think back on all of the times I have talked with Nico and Cruz and recall if I ever told them of the relationship that Alpha Rogan and I have with one another. I know that Lesia is aware of most of it, but there are things I still never shared with her. My hair was still damp from the shower, but I could feel moisture collecting at the back of my neck. I knew that it wasn't water dripping from my hair, but sweat at the thought of why he had come so suddenly. Lesia, thank the gods, was always so quick to act in any situation, and she was already moving into action. Grabbing the blanket from the couch, she wrapped it around me, swung us both towards the couch, and whispered in my ear, "Play along and act as sad as you can, so hopefully he won't stay too long." The whole time she was leading me to the couch, she was signaling her brothers with her fingers, and I was in awe of how someone can be so close to another that they can pick up their meaning with just simple looks and gestures. As the boys went to open the door, I reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Stay with me unless he demands that you leave. If he does, please just do as he asks," I begged her softly. For a moment she looked at me with a smug little smile on her face, almost like she didn't think he would do something like that, but I urged her, "Please, just do as he asks." I watched as her look turned from confidence to confusion and settle on concern. My eyes never left her s, but I willed her to see what I needed her to without making me say it. Pulling me tightly, she pressed her mouth to my ear. "Dylan, are you afraid of him? Do you think that he will hurt you?" We had little to no time to speak, and I didn't think that I was ready to tell her, or anyone, about my relationship with Alpha Rogan. I barely understood it myself, but I knew that I wasn't afraid for myself right now. Unsure if I should say anything, I felt that I needed to at least warn her to make sure that nothing happened to her or her brothers, so with her face still pressed close to mine, I spoke as softly as I could. "Yes, but I'm more afraid for you, not me," as I shifted so that I was leaning back into the couch when I saw that Nico was opening the door. Alpha Rogan stood alone on the porch, and while I couldn't see him fully through Cruz and Nico's large bodies, what I did see of his face looked annoyed at being greeted by someone other than me. His voice came out sounding surprised, but not friendly. "Afternoon, boys. Is there a reason that you are the one opening Dylan's door? I haven't seen Alpha Rogan since our trip to the city. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen Noel or VIT around either. I assumed that they were busy with everything that happened, but I can't say that I wasn't glad." Cruz didn't hesitate to respond to him. "Good afternoon, Alpha," he said as both he and Nico gave a slight bow of their heads. Dylan wasn't feeling well, so my siblings and I thought it best to see her home. Noticing that though they were showing him respect, they had not moved from where they stood blocking the entrance to my home. Lesia hadn't said anything else to me, but I could tell by the way she sat and watched the interaction at the door that she was upset. Ray seemed flustered, but I wasn't ready to listen to her. I was upset with her and hurt that when I finally chose to do something for myself, she took that choice away from me. Returning my attention to the door, I listened to see what Alpha Rogan would say next. I couldn't see his face clearly, so I couldn't tell if he was getting upset. Preparing to just get up and go to the door, I took a deep breath and tried to calm my nerves, but Lesia squeezed my knee quickly and shook her head ever so slightly while still looking towards the door. "Boys, don't be dumb, let our Alpha in. I'm sure he is here to check on Dylan after what happened today, isn't that right?" she called from beside me on the couch. Nico was the first to turn and look over at us, and I saw the quick glimmer in his eyes. Someone was speaking to him, but I wasn't sure who it was since his siblings were still both turned away from me. "Goodness, you must be right, sister," Nico said, nodding towards the Alpha and moving aside so that he can walk inside the house if he chooses to. Cruz, on the other hand, didn't move an inch, and I watched the Alpha as they stared at each other coldly when he had to turn slightly to the side to slide inside the house. Well, if I wasn't scared to death, I would have been pretty impressed by his boldness. But as Alpha Rogan walked past him, his eyes never leaving Cruz, his annoyance was clearly written on his face. I didn't have to pretend to shiver under the blanket I was draped in because I was truly afraid. Afraid of this moment. Afraid of what might still happen. Afraid of this man. Reminding myself that I was not alone, I remembered that the Alpha Rogan I know is not the one that others do. I have learned that he wears many faces and can change them on a whim. "Good afternoon, Alpha Rogan," I say, bowing my head to him while sitting on the couch next to Lesia. "Thank you for coming all the way out here when I am sure that you are very busy." Lesia reached out a hand and brushed it softly over my back in a comforting circle. Her touch was warm even through the blanket, and it eased some of the frantic beating of my heart. I watched as Alpha Rogan's eyes grew wide when she touched me with no hesitation, and continued to stare as Lesia moved her hand along my back. For a moment, I was tempted to ask her to stop because I couldn't understand the look on his face and what might lie behind this current mask. Just as I was about to reach out to stop her, Cruz walked over to the couch and threw himself inside the small space between me and the arm of the couch. When his large body squished itself into the space next to me, I couldn't help but sink further into the cushion from his added weight. I found myself pressed up against him, and the heat radiating from him was enough to make me start to sweat. His warmth wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't quite soothing either. Nico had come along Lesia's side of the couch and perched himself on the armrest and pulled his feet up underneath his long legs. I had to admit that he looked like the picture of what I thought the Cheshire Cat would look like. For a moment I wasn't sure that my little couch would hold the four of us, and the image of it breaking in half suddenly filled my head. Holding in the laugh that wanted to creep past my lips was easy when my eyes turned back to Alpha Rogan. He was standing in the middle of the living room looking at me like he couldn't understand what he was seeing. I knew that he had always told me to be cautious of others' kindness and how it was probably veiled with a hidden agenda or ill content due to my parents, but I didn't feel that from the Silveras. The shaking came back because if he was here, then I was almost certain that he had heard what happened at the school and I wasn't sure what he had learned of. Not with Aaron, but what happened with Ray. All of the warnings that I've received about letting anyone see her were running through my head. What if he was going to punish them for my mistake? In the short time that we had from then to now, I haven't even had a chance to talk to them about what they saw. A part of me didn't want to acknowledge it. I wanted to pretend that none of it happened. Both of the twins had witnessed my shift and seen Ray standing there in the hallway. As much as I wanted to know what they thought, I wished that I could make them forget. Alpha Rogan seemed a little unsure of what to do with himself, and that was something I had never seen from him before. He glanced around the room and must have decided on one of the chairs for my dining table because he quickly turned and grabbed one to drag over to place in front of me. Well, it seems that the information that I received was correct, he said as he perched on the chair. It appears that my nephew has not learned his lesson and fallen back into his old habits. The look of concern and anger flashed across his face, and for a moment I was scared. But that fear was not for myself, it was for Aaron. I recalled the way I had seen them that first night he had come here. It had struck me then that maybe their relationship was not what people had assumed it to be, but I honestly hadn't given it another thought. Aaron was Alpha Rogan's nephew and used that to his advantage both at school and around the pack. Everyone wanted to be around him just to see if they could get closer to the Alpha. I wondered if he was going to punish him or make him come and apologize to me. The thought of seeing him right now frightened me. Not because of what he might do, but because of what I had wanted to do. Alpha Rogan leaned his elbows onto his knees and bent his head forward to rest in his hands. He ran his big hands through his dark hair and let out a deep sigh. I'm sure dealing with things like this was tedious for him. When he sat up, he reached out his hand towards me and I couldn't hide the way I instinctively flinched away from his touch. Immediately, he pulled his hands back towards himself and clasped them together. Unable to meet his eyes, I watched his hands, his arms, his shoulders, anywhere but his face. Lesia's hand was still rubbing my back slowly, but I hadn't missed the stutter in her movements when she had felt me flinch away from him, and I knew that the twins had seen it too. I had no idea how I was going to explain that to them once he left. Maybe, if I was lucky, none of them would ask about it. Yeah right, I heard Ray mutter in my mind. Alpha Rogan started speaking about, but this time the softness had left his voice. Would it be okay for us to speak about this alone, Dylan? It seems like you are extremely upset about recent events. Forcing myself to meet his gaze, I spoke so quickly. Please, I'd like them to stay. I am just a little shocked about what happened and that everyone saw, but I promise that I'm okay, or I will be after some time. The urgency in my voice was obvious even to my ears, and I wished that I didn't sound so vulnerable or afraid. I honestly needed to know how much he knew so that I didn't tell him too much. Honestly, I am not sure that it was Aaron's idea or one of his friends who came up with the idea of dumping the food on me, I said as steadily as I could. Alpha Rogan just sat there watching me for a moment and softly nodded his head as I spoke. There was nothing in his eyes that let me know what he was thinking, so I just went on. It just caught me by surprise, and Lesia and her brothers are the ones who helped me get cleaned up and brought me home to get away from everyone, I said, sheepishly recalling the feeling of standing there in front of everyone. This time when Alpha Rogan spoke, it wasn't directed at me, but to the others. Would you three like to tell me what you saw? He said stiffly, as if asking them anything was an annoyance. Lesia spoke first. I didn't see what happened at first, but I got there when Trinity was dumping the second plate on her head in front of everyone. I rushed over to her, got her to the bathroom, and then had my brothers help me get her home. Her response was quick and to the point. I hadn't missed that she skipped the part of what happened before they brought me home. Nico spoke next. I came into the cafeteria at the same time as Lesia and didn't see what happened before either. I was still oddly squished into Cruz's side and couldn't really look up to see his face, but it was odd how I was able to feel the vibrations on my side when he spoke. I came in right before Camille dumped the first tray on Dylan's head and saw that Trinity said something to Aaron before going over and doing the same. I knew that he had to have started this, so I ran over and confronted him. Alpha Rogan's eyes darkened a bit and I wondered if he was going to ask for more information about what confronting him meant, but before he could say anything else, his cell phone rang. Irritation flashed on his face at the interruption, but when he pulled the phone out of his pocket, he quickly tapped a button to silence it. Well, it seems that I will need to speak to my nephew now, he said to all of us, as he stood to leave. The tension in my shoulders was starting to recede as I watched him put the chair back and head towards the door, but before he reached it he asked, Dylan, would you mind coming to speak to me on the porch for a moment? Dread filled me, and I felt my heart begin to race. Did he know that we had left out the fact that I shifted at school? I dug my nails into my palm again to force myself to calm down and nodded, yes, of course Alpha. It took me a moment to get off the couch due to being stuck between Lesia and Cruz, and I saw his eyes flash in annoyance. Lesia, thank the gods, helped me with a quick push on the back to propel me forward. Dropping the blanket, I followed him outside and closed the door behind us. He didn't stop there though, and walked a few paces away from the house. I followed close behind, and when he turned to look at me, I was glad that we were alone. Anger flashed in his eyes, and he reached out and grabbed my shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. Dylan, if something like this happens again, I would prefer that you come directly to me, instead of having these boys take care of it for you, he said quickly. Is there anything else that I don't know, like why my nephew would do something like this? His question stilled me because I had wondered that myself. Why had Aaron done this? Why would he decide to do this now after all this time? It honestly didn't make any sense to me, but I had to answer him. I am not sure what caused this or that Aaron is truly to blame, but that is all that happened, I said, looking right at his face. Lying was not new to me, and usually I lied by omission and not so plainly, but I knew that this was not just to protect me, but to protect my friends. Releasing my shoulder, he rubbed the spot softly for a moment and then let his hand trail down my arm. The whole while watching my face, then he said, I will deal with Aaron, before walking into the woods where I saw VIT waiting for him. I waited until they had both receded far enough away that I couldn't see them any longer and turned to walk back inside. As soon as I walked in the house, I noticed that the three Silveras were standing oddly close to the front window, but it was Lesia who spoke. Do you want to explain to me what the F***ck that was about? 34. Dylan. Even though I knew that they would have questions, I hadn't expected Lesia to be this angry. As I stood there, door still wide open and the three of them looking over at me, I was afraid. What if they didn't want to deal with the hassle of being my friend anymore? What if I was just too much trouble for them? I wasn't sure if I could handle that on top of everything else. Nico moved first. He walked over to the front door, closed it, and locked it. When I felt his warmth next to me, I realized how close he was and looked up at him. People didn't get that close to me usually, well ever really, besides Lesia who had just recently become a part of my life. I had always wondered why they hadn't felt indifferent to me like all the others but had been so afraid to ask. Lesia, chill, he told her. Why are you yelling at Dylan? None of this is her fault. The tears filled my eyes so quickly that I wasn't even really sure why. Maybe it was everything that happened today. I honestly couldn't say, but this time when I dug my nails into my palms it didn't stop the tears from falling. Lesia's eyes went from being filled with anger to tears of her own. OSH*T Dylan, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to come off like that, she said with such conviction that whatever hurt had started to bloom instantly vanished. Within the span of a heartbeat she was throwing herself at me. As she wrapped her slender arms around me, I held back the sobs that wanted to burst from my chest. She was shorter than me, but it felt as if she was the one holding me up. I didn't like to feel weak, but right now it didn't bother me the way it usually did. We stood there for a while just crying and holding each other until Cruz cleared his throat. So are you just gonna stand there crying for the rest of the day, or are we going to actually talk about what the hell happened? Even though I knew he was right about the fact that we really needed to talk about what happened today, Lesia was not in the mood to be told what to do by her little brother. Maybe Dylan doesn't want to talk to you about what happened today, Cruz. Did you ever think about that? She huffed at him as she pulled away from me, and placed both of her hands on her waist. No, of course I'll talk to you all. I was just worried, I muttered, still trying to slow the flow of tears that was still spilling from my eyes. Nico reached out and touched my left shoulder softly, but I still wasn't used to being touched so freely and I couldn't stop the way I flinched away from his touch. I'm sorry, he immediately said as he not only pulled back his hand, but took a step back away from me. No, I'm sorry, I tell him as I reach out to where he once stood. I'm sorry, it's not you, it's me. I'm just not used to being touched, I try to explain to him. Not used to being touched, or afraid of the touches you've received, Cruz asks coldly from where he still stood across the room. My gaze immediately went to him, just like Nico and Lesia's. What the hell are you talking about? Nico asked him in an accusatory tone. Even though we were all looking at him, Cruz stared straight at me, and when I met his gaze, I knew that he saw more than most, and definitely more than he should. I don't know what you're talking about, I said to him much softer than I intended. Ray on the other hand was practically yelling for me to admit it to them, to finally tell someone what I have gone through. Shut up, I hissed at her. Really Dylan, I saw you. The way you froze up when you knew who was here. The way you flinched when he reached out to touch you. The look on your face when you told Lesia you were afraid for her and not yourself. I had no words to refute him, and I felt my cheeks heat as I looked to Lesia. I hadn't expected her to tell them what I said, but I didn't necessarily tell her to keep that to herself. Lesia looked at me with no remorse and it only hurt worse. I looked at Nico, then back to Cruz, and shame filled me so completely that I had to get away from them. Turning back to the couch, I reached out and grabbed the blanket and started to fold it absent-mindedly. Unable to bring myself to look at them, I spoke as I worked. And what if you're right? What if someone has hurt me before? What if there is someone who scares me or that I'm afraid of? Afraid that he will hurt not only me, but others. What am I supposed to do about it? What can you do about it? A new wave of tears fell down my cheeks, and I couldn't stop them no matter how hard I tried to stop them. My nails had gone so far into my palm that I could not only feel the blood there, I could smell it. Lesia's small hand grabbed my wrist and I felt her rub her thumb across my knuckles. Don't do that, Dylan. Don't hurt yourself to stop from feeling or crying. There's nothing wrong with that. My hand was still clenched and my nail beds were now full of my blood. When I didn't shake her off, Lesia used her other hand and slowly pulled my fingers open one by one. The blood was slowly trickling down my hand, and when I felt something wrap around my palm, I looked down and saw Nico wrapping a napkin around my hand. Unable to look at them, I just stood there with my eyes closed. The tears had already stopped falling, but I was full of shame and embarrassment and uncertainty. Even if I didn't tell them about Alpha Rogan, they had already seen me shift and seen Ray, and if he found out, he would end up dealing with them and then me. The pang in my chest hurt, and when Ray spoke to me, I didn't try to force her to be quiet. I think it's okay for you to trust them, little one, she told me sweetly. I was still so angry with her, but I wanted to believe her with my whole being. When I opened my eyes, Lesia was still standing right in front of me, but her eyes had that glimmer in them, and I knew that she was linking with one of her brothers. Reaching down to place my now folded blanket on the arm of the couch, I turned and walked straight to the kitchen. Grabbing the kettle, I quickly filled it with water and placed it on the burner. I took the 4 new matching mugs that I ordered in anticipation of us having dinner together. I could hear them mumbling to each other, which was kinda annoying since I knew that they could easily link with one another instead of letting me know that they were obviously talking about me. Ray took this time to talk to me again, probably since I didn't immediately shut her out a moment ago. Do not be afraid to let them in, little one, she whispered softly into my head. Maybe she was right. I mean, Lesia was still here after everything that she has seen and heard, plus I still needed to talk about the whole shifting thing with the twins. Before I realized, the kettle had started thumping around on the stovetop and was about to start whistling. As I turned to the counter to pour the water into the cups, I almost bumped into Cruz. I glanced over to the living room and saw that Lesia and Nico were cleaning up the remnants of the soup and sandwiches from earlier, but clearly still having a conversation with each other. Cruz grabbed the kettle from me and turned to start pouring the water into the mugs, and once he was looking away from me, he started talking. Dylan, I didn't mean to push you, I was out of line and just wanted to know what was going on. I didn't realize that it might be difficult for you to talk to us or anyone about it, he said softly. I'm not weak, I'm just alone, I told him softly without looking at him, and what little noise was coming from the other room stopped. Lesia walked into the little kitchen and started opening the cabinets. I saw that she was pulling out honey, sugar, and spoons. We're gonna have tea, right? She says when she turned to look at me, and there was a softness in her smile that made me want to smile like that. Nodding at her, I saw Cruz handing the mugs to Nico over the little bar, and I grabbed my little box of tea and the milk from the fridge. Lesia grabbed a seat and started rummaging through the tea bags. I sat as close to her as I could at the little table, and then watched as Nico and Cruz took the other 2 seats. The blood on my bandage was dry and the wrapping was already starting to annoy me, but I decided against taking it off and having them all stare at it. Ray encouraged me to open up and share with them, but I knew that I shouldn't tell them everything. Alpha Rogan would be furious if he knew about this, so I decided to tell them just enough to understand. But, before I told them about my party, I knew that I needed to ask them about what happened today. I've watched the way that the boys have been acting towards each other, and it seems different than usual. Once Lesia made her tea, she quickly curled up her legs and made herself comfortable on the little chair. It made me smile because she reminded me of a dim cat so much sometimes. When she saw me smiling, she matched it in turn. Whatever you want to talk about, just know that this stays here, between the 4 of us, Kay, she said so confidently that I felt almost encouraged. I grabbed 2 tea bags and dumped them in my mug. The smell of blood orange and cranberry filled my nostrils, and I felt even more at ease. Can we talk about what happened today? I asked. All 3 of them nodded at me quickly, and I let out a sigh I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't mean what happened in the cafeteria, I mean what happened in the hall, I correct quickly. Not that what happened in the cafeteria with Aaron's friends didn't suck, it wasn't the biggest issue right now. Aaron and his friends have made my life hell since I was little. What I needed to know or make clear is that they had to keep the information about Ray a complete secret. You saw her, I say while looking at my mug, my wolf, Ray. Even if they nodded, I would have missed it, but Nico answered me immediately. Yes, we saw your wolf, but I have a feeling that Lesia has seen her already. His question wasn't accusatory, but he said it like he already knew the answer. Well, we are best friends, she said quickly, and the way that my heart leapt at her words almost startled me. Cruz quickly jumped in. What does that actually have to do with anything? It means, she snapped, that it shouldn't be a surprise that we share things with each other and keep each other's secrets, duh. When she stuck her tongue out at him, I couldn't help but laugh, and that helped me keep going. I am not supposed to let anyone see Ray, and those who have seen her have all been sworn to secrecy or have completely avoided me after Alpha Rogan talked to them. Why? Nico and Cruz asked in their usual way, and this time I didn't laugh because I had to answer them. Because I'm different, I answered. We don't belong here. I'm not even sure if I'm truly a member of this pack since I have no bond with it. No, you misunderstand my question, Cruz starts. Why does Alpha Rogan feel the need to do that? Obviously, it's so that no one talks about Ray, but as I'm thinking of how to answer him I can feel Ray in my head wishing him to keep going, to keep talking. Lesia is the one who spoke next. I have been thinking about that myself, because he knows I saw Ray months ago, but he never said or did anything to me. She was right, but I didn't know why she had been the one exception, and the more I thought about it, there was another. Aaron. Aaron had seen me shift, not once, but a few times now. I mean, hopefully the Alpha still only knew about the one time, but I'm sure he didn't know about the others or else he would have let me know. Nico seemed full of questions. What happened with your parents? Why do you live alone? Who told you that you have no bond with the pack? My parents died when they tried to betray the pack. I live alone because I have no family and the pack orphanage sucks, and Alpha Rogan says that's why I can't link with anyone. Answering his questions wasn't as hard as I would have thought, but saying those words out loud made them so real. Realier than when I think them, and I'm a bit nervous to see their reactions. Lesia took a big drink of her tea and I can tell she wants to say something, but she seems reluctant. That's not true, Dylan. Brea linked with Ray, remember? She spoke softly and I suddenly remembered. How had I forgotten that? It was that night that Alpha Rogan had stopped by with his guards and Aaron. Cruz barked at her. Lesia, how did you forget to mention that all this time? She looked a little embarrassed when she replied, I honestly forgot. Okay. There was so much going on that day and after, and I know that this is hard for Dylan to talk about, so I kinda just pushed it out of mind until now. So much has happened in such a short time and she had been the only one I had to help me get through it all, but she's right. I didn't ever talk to her about Ray. Ray sent soothing thoughts through me and I knew that she wasn't angry about it. She completely understood. It helped lessen a bit of the anger I still held towards her. Nico seemed to be ignoring them, and kept asking questions. Who else knows of your wolf and inability to link with others? A few of Alpha Rogan's personal guards have both seen Ray and also know that I can't link with anyone, but other than that, no one, but you three now and Aaron of course. The moment I mentioned him, Cruz turned his attention back to me. What do you mean Aaron knows? He asks quickly. I didn't understand why he was so concerned about Aaron, but then I remembered that they were friends. Aaron has seen Ray a few times now, I told him. Nico turned to Cruz and smacked him softly with the back of his hand. I guess you were wrong, brother. Cruz stood suddenly. It doesn't make sense. I'm not saying that Aaron isn't a complete D*ck sometimes, but he wouldn't do this to Dylan of all people. He cut himself off suddenly. I get it, dude. You don't want to think he can do something like this, but you were the one who attacked him earlier, Nico told him. Cruz was still standing and he was looking at his hands, but he let me hit him and I noticed, a little too late, that he already looked beat to hell before I got to him. Lesia had started to say something about Aaron and his friends, but I recalled the moment in the cafeteria when our eyes had met before everything happened. I'm not saying he's innocent, okay? I'm just saying that he was the one who begged me to get her out of there. Why would he do that if he wanted to hurt her? He yelled at Lesia. I had missed whatever it was that she had told him, but at his words I remembered that day in the woods when he talked to Ray. The image of him standing there naked flashed in my head and I immediately tried to push it out. Aaron had begged Ray to leave the woods before anyone saw her then also. Nico stood and smiled. Well, I guess the only thing we can do now is meet your wolf and see if we can link with her too. But only if you're okay with it. Ray was completely on board, and even though I was a bit nervous, I nodded in agreement. What do I have to lose, right? 35. Aaron. Awareness began hitting me as I struggled to determine what was the dream I had just been in and what was real. I woke up to unfamiliar smells and sounds. Whatever it was that I laying on felt more like a table than a bed. When my eyes fully opened, it still took a moment for my vision to focus. Lying on my back, all I saw was a bare ceiling with a small white fan that was spinning in a slow counterclockwise direction. For a moment, all I could do was watch the blades from the fan as they continued their rotation. As smoothly as they cut through the air, I could swear that I heard a soft whooshing sound as it completed each full rotation. In the distance I had started to pick up some odd metallic-like clicking noises and what sounded like hushed voices, but they were not as clear as I'd like. Even though my senses were functioning, my brain seemed to be fighting some type of fog or haze. My thoughts were coming slowly and I felt as if I was wading through water. I was trying hard to try to remember how I ended up here, and where here even was. Still lying on my back, I slowly turned my head from right to left to see if there was anything near me that could help me figure this out. As I looked around, I saw that I was in a small room with one door and no windows. There was a chair in one corner facing the direction in which I was laying. In addition to the chair and my makeshift bed, the room was completely bare. White walls, white floor, white ceiling, and the white fan. If the door hadn't been open slightly, I would have thought I was in some kind of cell, or medical facility. Since I've been in the cells that we have hidden below the barracks, I had to admit this room looked nothing like them, so I chose the later. I knew that there were still places in these lands that even I haven't been, and I'm sure that this was one of those. Before letting whoever may be here with me know that I was awake, I tried to reach out to Dane. For a moment there was nothing and fear sparked inside me. I forced myself to try to reach deeper for him. Dane, where are you? The words felt odd even thinking them. I mean, there's no way that he could disappear, right? Closing my eyes, I imagined searching for a light or a sign or something. I really had no idea what it felt like before he appeared anymore. He was such a significant part of not just my life, but of who I truly am. I begged for any sign of him and suddenly, as if he had been asleep, I felt a soft stirring inside my head. If I hadn't been worried about being heard by someone, I probably would have cried out. Dane, are you okay? I asked him anxiously. His presence inside my head always felt easy and comfortable, but right now I felt like I was pulling him out of slumber, but I didn't care as long as I could finally reach him. Yes, was all he grumbled. Now that I knew that he was okay, I decided to see how much of my body I could move. Images were coming back to me of what had happened before I woke up here. Flashes of being strapped down to that chair were mixed in with images of Noel, and the cafeteria. Pain hit me as I slowly lifted my arms and legs. Not as intense as the pain I've felt before, but significant enough to know that I was not fully healed. Sitting up was harder than I would have liked to admit, and I felt my head swim a bit as if I moved too fast I might fall over. Thankfully, I was able to make it to a sitting position before that happened. My first impression of what I was lying on was correct. I was on some type of exam table, and when I looked down at myself, I saw that my clothes were full of spots that had dried blood and what looked like a dark red sauce. The second that thought filled my mind, images of Dylan standing in the cafeteria full of pasta sauce dripping off of her filled my head. Gods, what the F***ck had I done? Dane didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. I could feel his anger, shame, and resentment. He knew that all this was to keep Dylan safe, but I knew that he hated it just as much as I did. There had been so many times that I had contemplated going against my uncle's wishes, but he made sure to drill it into me what would happen not only to me, but her if I did that. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't realize that someone had walked over to the room, and I realized it only when the door started to swing open wider. Surprise filled Mark's face as he walked into the room and saw me sitting up on the table. "I'm surprised to see you conscious this soon," he uttered as he walked over to a small tray table near the head of the table I hadn't seen. There were a couple small syringes, and when I saw him walk over to them, I jumped off the table. "What are those?" I yelled at him as I walked backwards towards the door he had just come through. My body ached all over, but hid it well. If Mark was here, then that meant that my uncle had either brought me himself, or had someone else do it. "Calm down, Aaron, I'm not going to hurt you," he said as he grabbed up the tray. "These were already here before they brought you in." Even though Mark has only ever helped heal me, I knew that he was completely loyal to my uncle, and if he instructed him to incapacitate me in any way, he would do it. Mark's purple eyes were focused on the vials in his hand, and when he looked over at me, I had to admit that they were as breathtaking as they were unsettling. The look on his face was a mixture of annoyance and concern, and when he spoke to me, it took a moment for me to register what he was saying. "Look, I healed you as best as I could, until your wolf regains strength. There is nothing else I can do for your physical body." While I tried to make sense of his words, I kept staring at his face, and I noticed that he looked a bit haggard. His dark hair fell limply on his forehead, and I saw bluish circles under his eyes. All of the times I've been around Mark, I never really had the opportunity to find out anything about him, like his age, or how he came to be living in our pack. My uncle kept close watch on him more than almost any other. Unsure if I was able to leave or if I had to stay here with him until further instruction, I asked, "Can you tell me how long I've been here?" Mark rolled his eyes, but shifted the small metal tray from one hand to the other so he could look at the watch on his wrist. "It's been about 4 hours or so, but I honestly didn't think you'd wake up after all that sh*t he let them inject you with." I was still trying to grasp everything that he was saying, and for some reason his words were not helpful in the way that they should be. The frustration was now radiating from him as I continued to look at him in utter confusion. My mind was still working on trying to remember everything from the past few hours, but I did not recall being injected with anything. Could my uncle really have used some kind of drug on me? I considered it for a moment, but as my thoughts sifted through all of the years I have lived here with him, it didn't surprise me in the slightest. If there was a way for him to torture me, he would use any and all means. If not for my aunt or the fact that he had no true heir, I'm sure that he would have killed me off by now, or turned me into one of his puppet guards. Mark looked as if he could see the wheels spinning in my brain and took pity on me. "Is it my words that cause you pain, or the fact that you now realized what was done to you, or is there something else that troubles you so?" I needed to get out of here, and I didn't just mean out of this room or building. I need to get out of these lands, out of this pack, and away from him. But honestly, I had no idea how to do any of it. Dane finally spoke. "Get out of this room first, and we can figure out the rest later," he gargled out huskily. He was right. I needed to get out of this room first. That would be my main priority, but was it as easy as just walking out of this room and essentially the building? "Can I just leave then?" I asked Mark in earnest. If there was nothing that he could do for me, was there anything that he could do to stop me? The look he gave me almost made me laugh. "He just said to heal you. He didn't say I had to keep you once I did." At that he walked past me and out the door, but to my surprise, he held it open for me. Unsure of whether it was a trap or not, I moved slowly towards the door and finally walked through it, facing him the entire time. Once I was out the door, Mark pointed to the left. "Go down that hall and the door on the right will get you out of the building." I watched him walk away and through another set of doors to his right. When the door opened, I saw quite a lot of chaos on the other side, but I had no idea what any of it was at first glance, nor did I care at the moment. Once he was inside and the door closed behind him, I sprinted for the door as quickly as I could, and I had to admit to myself that it was more of a rather awkward trot. For a split second I was almost sure that the door was going to lead me to another room, or even a barred door, but thankfully, I stumbled out onto grass. "Thank God," I muttered as I careened towards the trees. Looking around, I wasn't sure exactly where I was, but sniffing the air, and looking around, I realized that we were close to the old barracks, and that also meant that we were near Dylan's house. The moment I was in the trees, I leaned against the largest one I could find and breathed in the fresh air. If there were gods, then I wished that one of them would strike me down right here and just end this all. End all the pain. Not just the pain I must endure, but the pain I must inflict. As I waited for one of those mysterious gods to, for once, do as I wished, I heard voices coming towards where I was. Would this day never end? I just wanted to get home and sleep in my own bed until Dane was able to help my body heal. Even the little bit of energy that I used to get here seemed to tire me to the core. Deciding that hiding and letting whoever it was just pass me by, I sunk down until I was now sitting against the tree instead of standing and closed my eyes to listen. The voices still sounded far enough off that I couldn't tell who it was, but after a few minutes I could make out that there were 4 in the little group that was walking this way. My thoughts were all over the place, and the longer I sat here waiting for the right opportunity to get away, the further my mind pushed for me to start remembering what happened. Dylan's laugh when we sat at the table talking, her soft smile when she first walked into the cafeteria, and the pure rage on her beautiful wolf's face when she rushed into the hallway of the school. Had they gotten her home without anyone finding out what happened? Were they still there with her? Did she hate me more than ever now? Those were just a few of the questions that were running parallel in my mind with the images I had stored of her. Tears filled my eyes at the thought of having to hurt her again and again. What would he make me do next if this didn't work to keep others away from her? Lost in thought as I hadn't noticed that the voices were now extremely close to where I was sitting in the grass. It was late afternoon and the sun was setting, so when I recognized the voices, my heart stopped. What were they thinking? After everything that happened today, why would they be out here of all places? I strained to make out all of the voices, hoping, no praying, that it was just the twins with their sister and not with anyone else. Not with the one person who would loathe the sight of me. If I could shrink down into the ground, I would. I would climb up this tree and never come back down. If I could escape this moment, this life, if that is the only way that I could stop this, I would. Once they were within a few feet of me, I dared take a peek from around the tree. As quietly as I could, I moved to glance around the tree, and to my horror, I saw all 3 of the Silveras along with Dylan. Gods, I wish the ground would swallow me whole right now. Once I saw her, my eyes couldn't leave her. She looked beautiful and happy, and if I wouldn't have been there earlier, I wouldn't believe that something awful had even happened to her today. She was walking arm in arm with Lesia, and even though I could acknowledge that Lesia was nice to look at, she was nothing compared to Dylan. Odd, that even like this, my body reacted to the sight of her immediately. Dane even pushed himself to the forefront of my mind and growled, "Fix this and keep her safe," before he was gone again. I wasn't sure what they might do if they were to see me right now, so I decided to play it safe and link with Cruz to see what they were doing, but not let him know I was nearby just yet. "Cruz," I called out to him and watched as he completely stopped walking. He didn't respond to me immediately, and I think I held my breath the entire time he stood there waiting. "What is it?" Nico asked him quietly while still trailing Lesia and Dylan, but pausing for a moment to check on his brother. Cruz looked around quickly, as if searching for me, then responded, "It's nothing, brother. Nothing at all." Ouch, that hurt, but I had it coming, I guess. They kept walking and I waited for him to finally say something, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't. That they would just walk by and I would just be stuck here wondering what they were up to. But, finally, he showed me just a sliver of mercy and said, "I know you are near, but you need to leave. She is not ready to see you or forgive you, and neither am I." His words hurt, but not as much as I would have imagined that they would, because there was hope that maybe one day she could forgive me if I was ever able to leave this place and get away from my uncle. One day I would explain everything to her. I would beg for her to forgive me and try to make her understand that it was all for her safety, to keep him from doing much worse to her. They were moving away from me, away from where I hid, and I wished that I could follow, join them, join her. But, as I heard her soft laughter flutter through the trees, I knew that it would only cause her pain. I was about to get up and head to the pack house, but I suddenly smelled it. A scent that didn't belong. Not the same as the last intruder, but definitely not someone from this pack. They were near, and they were coming closer. I didn't have Dane and there was nothing that I could do to protect them, only to let them know. I linked with Cruz, but it was too late. The moment I said the words, "Someone is coming, you need to get out of here," a giant mahogany wolf leapt into the clearing they had just walked into, and there was nothing I could do but run to get help. 36. Dylan. We had been sitting around the living room trying to decide where we would go so that I could shift and let Ray out. It had to be somewhere that we could be sure that no one would just happen to come across us. After a while we decided that out by the coast would be the best option, since there haven't been too many patrols out there for the past few weeks, and if we needed to hide, we could go up the mountain. We didn't want to wait for dark to completely fall, so the twins went to go get clothes for themselves and Lesia, and I stayed home to get my own stuff ready. Lesia stayed with me, and when the boys left she followed me to my room. Throwing herself on my bed, she watched me get a small bag and some sweats and an oversized shirt. I had never done this before. Packing a bag to go out for a planned run was new and a little scary. Even though they have all seen me naked, I didn't want to just parade in front of them like that. Lesia was still watching me when I walked over to my bed, folded the things I got, and put them in the bag. "Are you sure you want to do this, Dylan? You know that you don't have to do anything that you don't want to," she said softly as she reached out her hand and placed it on top of mine. Gods, I was so glad to have a friend like her. I patted the top of her head with my other hand. "I know, but I really want to try this with you guys. I think we might learn something useful." The smile she gave me filled me with comfort, and I knew that if at any minute I changed my mind, she would be completely okay with it. By the time we had gotten back to the living room, the twins were back with 3 backpacks of their own. It was late afternoon when we left the house and headed to the woods that led to the coastline. I had always loved living out here this far from the pack house. The old barracks were used mostly as storage now, and people who don't live in the area pretty much stay far away from this part of the pack lanes. As we walked through the woods, Lesia tried really hard to lighten the mood by telling embarrassing stories of her and the twins from when they were little. Some of them were too funny. She told me that when the twins were little they used to try to trick everyone into thinking they were the other twin, especially when they were in trouble. Apparently they had the same shade of hair up until they were around 8 or 9, and then Cruz's hair started to gradually become a bit darker, so they had played numerous tricks on their parents and even Lesia their whole childhood. Hearing the different stories of all the escapades that they got up to filled me with a mixture of both joy and sadness. I had no childhood stories of childhood pranks and mischief to share with them. Ray's thoughts were so loud in my head that it was a little hard to focus on everything at once. Lesia's stories, my own feelings, and Ray's excitement were enough to keep me from fretting about what we were on our way to do. When we were walking through the last part of the forest, I noticed that there were so many different sounds in the woods, but I had a feeling that it was due to the fact that there wasn't going to be a moon tonight. That was another reason why we had chosen to do this tonight. With no light from the new moon, we would have a lot more privacy tonight than we would on any other night. Birds and insects are not the only ones who are affected by the moon. Even though we are more advanced than simple animals, our kind are also affected by different phases of the moon. Some wolves are affected more than others. Of course we are all affected by a full moon when we are young and have our first shifts, but some can't even go outside when it's a new moon. Most say that it's more superstition than actual physical or mental affliction, but I've never had the chance to really ask anyone about it, and only read about it in journals and textbooks. There was a time when I was younger that I was infatuated with the different phases of the moon and the lunar cycle, but with work and responsibilities I didn't really have much time to focus on it anymore. The woods looked so different as we walked through them. The smells and sounds of plants and animals that were thrown off their usual routines. Nights of the new moon were always my favorite because those were usually the days that I could shift and let Ray run free, or I could train on the beach. Even though I have only lived out here for a few years, I have become as familiar with the land as I could. Since I needed privacy to let Ray out, we had to make sure that we knew all the best hiding places. When Lesia's stories ended, we walked for a while in quiet comfort as I enjoyed just being in their presence. When Cruz stopped walking all of a sudden, we all stopped to see if he noticed something out of the ordinary. He ushered us on, and after a few moments he ended up catching right back up to us. Nico and him were now walking behind Lesia and I when suddenly something felt strange. There was a shift in the air and the sounds of the forest were going quiet around us. For a moment, I thought that someone had caught us, maybe one of the patrols or the guard members was out this far and we had missed seeing them first. When we walked into the large clearing near the coast, Ray seemed to suddenly insist on shifting and her thoughts were so jumbled it was hard for me to understand. Shock, surprise, fear, and frustration had suddenly replaced all of her excitement and anticipation. The sudden shift in her thoughts and emotions was a little overwhelming and for a second I felt off balance. As soon as the sudden spot of vertigo vanished I looked around to see my companions all on edge. The twins and Lesia's eyes all had that shiny gleam in them and I knew that they were all trying to silently communicate with each other and figure out what was going on. I was more confused at who all three of them were talking to. Was there truly someone else here that one of the twins, or maybe even Lesia, was linking with? The sound of something approaching our location came on so suddenly and their approach was coming so quickly that I was worried about us getting caught out here. Explanations for what we were doing out here were already running through my head. We were just taking an after-dinner walk. We wanted to go out on the night of the new moon. Thank the gods that they had come upon us while we were still in our human forms and not while we had all already shifted. Whoever was headed this way had come from the coast, which meant that it had to be one of the patrols. Inwardly, I hoped that it would be Vit or Noel, but I knew that the chances of that were slim to none. Cruz and Nico looked like they were about to shift and had started to move in front of Lesia and I as if they were taking up defensive or protective positions. Wait, if they were trying to shield us, did this mean that they already knew that we were going to get in trouble for being out here? Ray was practically thrashing about in my head and I nearly let the shift take control. Thank the gods I didn't, because at that moment right before she pushed completely forward, a giant wolf jumped out of the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. Anytime I saw another wolf I was always stunned into silence. Every wolf I had seen so far had been amazing in its own way. Some wolves were much larger than others, but each one had its own distinguishable features. This wolf, for example, had hair that seemed to be somewhat longer than that of the other wolves I've seen. Eyes, ears, tails, coloring, and even scars were just a few of the individualities I've noticed. This wolf's coloring was hard to fully make out with only the limited lights coming from the darkening sky that held no moon, but it looked like a dark brownish red. A scent that reminded me of cinnamon and smoke filled my nose and made my chest ache a bit. Not because I didn't like it, but because it felt oddly familiar and I wanted more of it. Before I realized what I was doing, I had dropped my pack, closed my eyes and had taken a few steps forward, inhaling the air greedily. Never having smelled anything like this, I wasn't sure why my body and mind were reacting in this way, but it wasn't an unpleasant feeling. For a moment I felt as if I could almost taste the cinnamon on my tongue. Behind my closed eyes, I was picturing a snow-filled forest, warm fire, and large mugs of spiced tea. Ray was fervently trying to speak to me and even force herself into my mind, but had completely stopped trying to force a shift. Dylan, you need to focus, she kept repeating over and over. I had forgotten where I was for a moment, forgotten who I was with, and let the power of the odor evoke all kinds of images in my mind. If I was being honest, the feelings of pleasure and comfort were what held me in place for a bit longer than they should have. A soft touch of my hand pulled me out of my illusion, and back to reality. When I opened my eyes, Lesia was on my right softly grabbing at my hand, and I noticed how far I had gotten from where I dropped my bag. Turning slowly, I noticed that even though Lesia had reached out for my hand, she was straining forward to reach for me, almost like she didn't want to get closer to the wolf in front of us. On my other side there was a large tawny wolf next to Cruz who was visibly straining to keep his shift at bay. The comfort and soothing feelings that had filled me only seconds ago were now slowly seeping out of me as I took in my friend's reactions. Looking over at the wolf, I saw that other than its initial appearance in the clearing, it hadn't made any move to come closer and stood almost as still as a statue. Staring back was the only thing I could do until I knew what we were dealing with. I tried to take in as much of the massive wolf as I could with what little light we had. From this distance I could tell that the wolf was a male because of his height and sheer mass. There was a large oddly shaped scar across the left part of its chest, but his eyes were the most visible feature. Dark gold eyes stared at me and images of warm honey danced in my mind. Though the twins seemed ready to pounce, I did not get the impression that this wolf wanted to attack us, but what did I know? Who is this? Lesia asked out loud to her brothers, and I knew that she did it so that I was part of the conversation. I'm not sure, Cruz answered coldly. None of us have been able to link with him, which means that he is not from our pack. The moment those words registered, I remembered what everyone had said about the intruder that had been coming to our pack. I was about to take a step back when the wolf suddenly bowed its head and lowered itself to the ground. We all watched in disbelief. If this wolf was not from our pack, why would it suddenly lower itself into a submissive position? Even though it was now on the ground, his eyes were still watching me, and I watched right back as it flattened its ears and even lowered its tail to lay by their side. Cruz took a step toward me, and Lesia did the same on my other side. They were both close enough that I could feel the heat from their bodies against my arms. Nico on the other hand prowled in front of where the three of us stood and I heard his soft growling. As he paced back and forth in front of us, I noticed a few differences in their appearance that I found quite interesting. Nico was large, but nowhere near as large as the wolf across from us was. I also saw that there was quite a few differences in the shape of their ears, noses, and the length of their hair. How odd that I would be able to take all of this in while unsure of what was even going on or if we were in danger. Ray seemed to be paying even more attention than I was. Look at the size of that scar on his chest, what could have made that? She asked more to herself than to me. Intrigued by her question I began to picture different kinds of knives or blades that could have possibly cut him bad enough to scar his body like that. Cruz nodded softly, and I caught the quick shake in my peripheral vision right before I saw him take a step forward. Who are you, and what are you doing in the Blood Mist pack? He asked with a sense of authority I've never seen from him before. As I looked at the dominance in his posture I remembered that he was part of the patrol. The wolves ***ed their head to the side softly and slowly moved their lips. For a moment I thought he was going to snarl or growl, but it seemed like he was trying to smile. In that moment the enormous wolf had gone from looking like a ferocious lion to looking like a large dog. I couldn't hold back the little giggle as I imagined the shift in my mind. When the sound left my throat, all eyes turned to me, and I watched as the wolf's ears went up in response as well. Lesia asked quietly, Dylan, is everything okay? I had to think about that for a moment. Was everything okay? Yes, I mean other than the fact that a strange wolf had made it onto our packlands on the night that we were sneaking to the beach where I was going to show my wolf to not one but 3 people when I have been expressly forbidden from doing so. If they are not from our pack, how can we talk to them? I asked all 3 of them, but I said it loud enough for the wolf to hear as well. Even though I could tell that my friends were obviously worried about the wolf, I didn't feel as though they had any ill intent, towards us at least. Odd, since I was usually frightened by most situations I was unfamiliar how to navigate this whole thing. Cruz answered cautiously, the only way for us to talk to them is for them to shift into their human form. As if the wolf had been waiting for permission to speak, they softly barked. Ray laughed in my head, I think they want to shift to talk to you. I agreed with her, but it struck me as odd that she had come to the conclusion that they were here for me and not anyone else. I think they agree with you, I said trying to hide the excitement in my voice. Ray's emotions were really rubbing off on me, and it was getting hard to focus on how I actually felt in this moment. Lesia spoke and I was surprised, and impressed by her. If we allow you to shift, will you stay where you are and tell us what it is that brought you here? The wolf slowly turned his gaze from me, to her, to our clasped hands, and then back to me. The glow in their eyes brightened and they nodded their massive head. As slowly as they could, the wolf stood up and then shifted. A small bag had been strapped to their leg that I had not seen earlier, and he immediately reached in and pulled out a pair of shorts that he quickly put on. The man that stood in front of us was, well, beautiful. He had brilliant pale skin that shone even under the dark sky and his short ruffled hair fell softly against his forehead. Even from this far away, I could see his smile and it was so full of joy and warmth that I couldn't help but smile back. Cruz looked at me, and then back at the man across from us. Now tell us who you are and why you are here, he demanded. The man smirked at him quickly and was about to take a step towards us, but Cruz yelled out to stop him. No, stay where you are and tell us from there. As you wish, young one, the man said in a husky voice filled with a sense of snarky laughter. First, let me tell you that I am not here to hurt you, but I am here for her, he said as he nodded in my direction. That caught me by surprise and I stilled instantly. My 3 companions did as well, but they all moved quickly to encircle me as best they could. Lesia's grip on my hand tightened and she was about to say something when a familiar voice came from my far right that caught everyone's attention. VIT walked out of the woods a little to the left of where the strange man stood. Tristan, are you really here to ruin everything? 37. Rowan. The past few days have been harder than most. Not just because of business and all the things I have in the works for the future, but it was more than all of that. Since I was young, there have only been a few constants in my life, but I have come to depend on them. Those have been my grandparents, my uncles, and my friends. Friends did not come easy for me when I was younger because I wouldn't let anyone in. Thankfully, I did finally make 2, but I have always been worried that they were built more out of circumstance and not organically. Micah and Tristan had both found themselves in situations similar to mine in many ways and we all met when I started living among the Silver Moon Pack. At first it seemed as if my whole world had burned down to the ground. My family was gone, I had no home to return to, and I was still dealing with the fact that I wasn't a normal human or shifter child. For a while, after everything happened I resented everything and everyone. I resented my parents for dying, for leaving me here alone to face this world without them, and for taking my brother with them. But if I was being honest, even at such a young age, the thing that bothered me the most was the fact that my parents had created me to be an inferior wolf. Living in the pack permanently after everything happened made me resent those around me who had everything that I didn't. Other kids had parents and friends who were all similar to them in every way. I learned much too late that it was me who pushed others away because I was filled with too much resentment. Resentment of not just them, but of myself. Never feeling like you are enough or like you were dealt a bad hand are horrible thoughts to have, but having them live permanently inside your head is worse. Every time I think back on my youth, I am always so thankful that Micah and Tristan were too determined, or too thick-headed in Tristan's case, to give up on me. I was so lost in thought, that I hadn't even heard Xavier when he walked into my office. Sir, he said with a questioning tone in his voice while waving his hands out in front of my face as if he was unsure that I had seen him. Sorry Xavier, I was lost in my thoughts there for a moment, but you brought me back to the present. What can I help you with? I asked him shaking off my nostalgia. It's about Alpha Rogan sir, he said looking a bit anxious. Sitting back in my chair I motioned towards the chairs in front of my desk for him to take a seat. Xavier sat and I was glad that he did. Honestly, he looked like he was on the verge of passing out or worse. Xavier helped run this company for years and I was glad that he decided to stay on to help me, but seeing him like this made me feel a bit bad for him. Aspen had been created by my parents, but was essentially owned by my father. When he was gone, the company was handed over to the board to do with as they saw fit. Thankfully, Xavier had been one of my father's friends and had been aware of the supernatural world, even if what he knew didn't really go past surface level. He was still in the know. Xavier was a strong and sturdy man per human standards and from what I would hear other employees say when I worked as a manager in the data and transcriptions department, he was considered very handsome for an older man. Right now though, Xavier looked like he was running on coffee and prayers alone. His hair was more white than black now and his short cropped hair that was usually perfectly coiffed was now sticking out in odd places. The neat suits that we still wears are starting to noticeably fit him just a bit looser than they used to. Even though I wanted to try to keep him at arm's length, I always had a soft spot for him before I came to work here and it has only just increased as I got to know him. Xavier, have you had anything to eat today? I asked as I was already flipping open my phone to place an order for us to have lunch in here. Who has time to eat? He shrieked as he slumped lower into the chair. For a moment I was afraid he was going to just slip right out onto the floor. Luckily he didn't. Well, I have to eat every few hours, if I don't I'll lose my mind, I tell him as I start clicking away on the screen. And before you tell me you don't have time to eat, this is not a request, I demand that you join me for lunch. In that moment, I knew I won, but the look on his face made me want to laugh so hard it took much more self-control to keep it in than I thought it would. Once I ordered double what I usually do for lunch, I figured I would use this as a working lunch and go over some easy questions with him. Debating on where I wanted to start, I wasn't prepared for his question. I was wondering why I haven't seen either of your friends around the office lately, is everything okay with them? Looking at Xavier, I momentarily considered the fact that maybe he wasn't just a normal human. How could he have come up with that question randomly when I had just been thinking about the 2 people he was inquiring about? Answering his question was a bit harder because I wasn't sure just how much information that I wanted to give him about all of my personal details. While I trusted him to help with the running of Aspen, I still wasn't fully convinced that he didn't somehow provide personal information to Rogan about my family. Deciding on answering a question with a question seemed easier than really delving into those feelings. What makes you ask about them so suddenly? Pushing himself up a little in his seat he seemed to become a bit self-aware and adjusted his tie and jacket, but his facial expressions didn't really change much. Seeming to consider his words carefully, he said while fixing the cuffs of his jacket, I thought that since we would be having lunch together I could ask things that weren't just about business. If I have overstepped, I apologize. Damn it, I hadn't even considered the fact that he was just trying to have a regular conversation with me. Being constantly on alert and always trying to find out what others are scheming, I feel like I have lost the ability to see the good in others. No, don't apologize, it's me. I don't how to do this anymore. Be just Rowan. It's hard to turn it off now that I am, well here. Xavier looked at me with understanding and I thought I detected a hint of pity in his eyes. Don't get me wrong. I'm exactly where I have planned on being for so long. It's just that I never planned for there to be so many additional variables that I couldn't have accounted for, I say, trying to explain my previous comment. Xavier nodded his head along with my words, and I wasn't sure if he was agreeing with me or if he was just agreeing with my stupidity. His lack of response made me a bit uncomfortable, and I wondered if he was thinking that I was in over my head. You know, planning on taking the company worked perfectly, and I am not sure if that made me assume that all my others' plans would go this well or if I was just lucky. Everyone around me has been working to help make this all happen, especially Micah and Tristan. I wasn't sure why I couldn't stop talking. Maybe my first thoughts about Xavier were right and he had some form of magic that he was unwittingly using on me. Everyone around me has had a reason to help me get here. My grandparents wanted me to find peace, my uncles wanted revenge for my mother, and my friends each had their own reasons for helping me get here. They both have lost loved ones to Rogan and want to see him taken down. He was still sitting there nodding at me, and for whatever reason I wanted him to understand where I was coming from. I wanted him to see things from my perspective and tell me that I was doing the right things. Never have I wanted someone's approval in any of my choices the way I suddenly wanted his. Xavier sat up a bit higher in the chair and was about to say something when a knock on the door let me know that our lunch was here. He quickly got up and walked to open the door. 3 aides came in pushing 2 carts. There were quite a bit of covered dishes in different shapes and sizes, and I watched as their eyes seemed to take in me and my guest as realization hit them as to why I ordered so much more food than usual. I had them set up all of the dishes on the table near the couch so that we could eat in a somewhat comfortable area. I knew that if we ate here at my desk it would cause us to rush and try to get back to work as quickly as we could, like I do every day. Do you usually order this much food? Or do I look like I haven't eaten in years and you are trying to fatten me up? He laughed a bit awkwardly as he got up to walk over to the couch. Looking at the food, I honestly felt like I should have ordered a bit more. There were 6 medallion cut steaks, a plate with grilled chicken over rice, some sautéed shrimp, pasta, and 3 different kinds of grilled vegetables. Not to mention they brought a bowl of fruit and some dessert as well. I ordered double of what I usually order for lunch. Is it not to your liking? I ask as I take a seat near him. No, he replied quickly as he started to make a plate for himself. It's just that I don't usually eat like this at work. I'll just grab something really quick in the cafeteria. Shocked, I looked over at him getting good-sized portions, and I couldn't help but feel like I put that type of pressure on him to make him think that he couldn't take care of himself while doing his work. From now on you will have catered lunch brought to your office and I will not take no for an answer, I tell him quickly. His answering smile should have made me feel good, but I honestly should have been aware of the fact that he wasn't prioritizing his lunches in order to take care of the work I assigned him. Our meal passed in companionable silence, and I could see that the edgy nervousness that he had when he first came into my office had slowly started to seep out of him. Even though I knew Xavier's background, I still decided to ask him some personal questions. How long did you know my father? The look on his face was a mixture of regret and happiness. When he looked at my face he seemed to be looking for something rather than just looking at me. You look so much like him, he tells me wistfully, but you have your mother's hair and eyes, so one has to look hard to see him in there. I've known your father, he corrected himself really quickly. I knew him, since we were both little kids. We grew up together and went to school with each other from elementary through college. I knew that my parents met each other in college, and that this is where Xavier met her as well, but I really wanted to hear him share some little details about them. Your parents and I were great friends, and even though they eventually became a couple, they never made me feel like a third wheel. It became the 4 of us eventually though. Your father knew that he wanted to start a business to bridge the gap between our world and your mother's. I had always wondered what made him choose to create the company, but knowing why he did it only filled me with a greater resolve to reach my goals and essentially avenge them. Do you know when Rogan came into contact with my parents, I have always wondered when it was they met him, I asked without really thinking out my question. We met him when we were in college, he answered quickly while he grabbed a plate full of fruit. Rogan's sister was a friend of ours and we met him when he used to come and visit her on campus. I couldn't hide my surprise. How the hell had I missed the fact that my parents had been friends with that monster's sister? I stared at him in disbelief. And where is she now? I asked through gritted teeth. She died, many years ago, but we lost contact with her when she met her mate and left school to get married. Your mother and her were best friends, and the last time I saw her was at their funeral. I wondered if she ever found out that her brother was the one who killed not only her best friend, but her entire family. Well, minus me, because so many didn't even know I existed. Hearing about this mysterious person who had known my parents and had such a relationship with them made me curious to ask more questions about her and them. But right when I was about to ask her name, Xavier's cell phone rang. When he looked at the screen to see who was calling, his eyes swept to mine quickly. It's Rogan, would you like me to answer it? I wonder if his filthy ears were itching since we had been talking about him. Yes, see what he needs. Maybe he is going to agree to my meeting. Xavier answered him, and I watched his facial expressions shift so many times that I really wished I had made him put it on speakerphone. Listening to just his side of the conversation let me know that we were about to have an unexpected and an unwanted guest, but I could tell that Xavier was hesitant to agree to anything without speaking to me first. Motioning for him to put him on hold, I waited for him to mute the phone. What the f*** is he up to now? I asked him while I called for the aides to come in and clear the food away. It seems that he is coming to the office now because he was already in the city and wanted to know if you had time to meet since he was nearby. That conniving little **CK, he probably didn't like the fact that I was making him meet on my terms and decided to just come here now to show me that he could. I said more to myself than Xavier. Let him know that I'm free now and instruct the guards to escort him all the way from the gate to my door. He is not allowed to step 1 foot unaccompanied on my property. Xavier got back on the phone and made the rest of the arrangements with Rogan and then immediately reached out to one of the other security captains since Tristan wasn't here. Tristan was the head of security and I knew he would have loved to have an opportunity to **CK with Rogan. I haven't seen him since that day he stormed out of the board meeting and I haven't had the courage to call him to try to explain everything. I resolved to make a point of reaching out to both Tristan and Micah when I left the office today, but I put it aside for right now. If Rogan was coming here, I needed to prepare myself to meet him head on. He was much closer to the property than he let on because we got the call about 5 minutes later that he had just reached the security gates. In less than 10 minutes I heard the ding of the elevator letting me know that he was already on the floor, and in another 2 minutes he was shown into the boardroom. Well, since I had some free time, I figured why wait to set something up and just come over and see if you were able to meet with me now. Seems that I was right after all, he said with that arrogant smirk in his voice that made me want to punch him in his despicable face. 38. Dylan. I'm not sure when, but it seems like lately I began to expect the unexpected. It seemed that nothing has been working out the way that I thought it would, and I still wasn't 100% sure how I felt about it. One of the most unexpected things was not the fact that I had found myself in the woods about to shift into my wolf in front of others willingly. It wasn't even the fact that we had encountered a strange wolf who didn't belong to our pack while out here. Not even seeing VIT standing here and addressing the stranger in a way I never thought I would have ever seen from him, which was throwing my mind in a tizzy and had my thoughts all over the place. I have been around this man many times over the years and I can count on one hand the number of times I have heard him speak, and among those times he has never spoken like the way he is with this man right now. There was a gruff hoarse rasp to the words he spoke so comfortably and I wasn't sure if that was his natural speaking voice, or if he was out of breath from rushing over here. It was that VIT knew this man. He had to. He called him by name the moment he walked out of the trees. I knew it to be true because the man reacted to him immediately. Watching the scene unfold before me was like nothing I've ever seen before. Their facial expressions gave away little and when they did they immediately caught themselves and removed the emotions as to wipe the slate clean. VIT was in his usual black ensemble, but I noticed that he was wearing something on his head. Thinking that maybe he was trying to keep his bald head from the cold, I didn't think too much of it, but his usually clean face had a hint of stubble on his chin and cheeks that were completely out of character for him. Assessing his appearance, I realized that if he ran over here, he would have had to do it on foot because he was wearing way too many clothes to have shifted and gotten dressed. The stranger, who we now knew was named Tristan, just stared at VIT for a few moments. At first it appeared as if he had seen a ghost, then his expressions switched from surprise, to shock, and then to all-out anger. Did you know? Tristan growled, and I watched as his chest seemed to begin rising and falling very quickly. I'm not sure what happened or why, but his calm and somewhat friendly appearance was slowly shifting. Unsure if he was about to lose control and shift back into his wolf, me and my little group all simultaneously took a step back. We were standing in a triangular formation with pretty equal distances between us, but it seemed that they had almost completely forgotten about us right now. Does anyone know what the **CK is going on? Lesia whispered to us all. Unable to answer her I just shook my head, but I heard one of the twins, if not both of them, tell her no. Did you know? Tristan asked again, and it was obvious this time that he was only speaking to VIT. I looked between the two of them as if this was a play and it was now VIT's turn to say his lines. VIT stood there just watching the man named Tristan, but he didn't answer him either by word or shake of the head. This only seemed to make him angrier and I was almost sure he was going to end up losing control and attacking. It was dark out now and while it was a bit hard to see him completely, I thought that from this distance VIT looked as if he was straining, but I wasn't sure what could have been causing him to physically struggle at the moment. Lesia had come close to me so quietly, that I jumped when I felt her hand on mine, but even the tiny noise that came out of me didn't draw the attention of the other two men. We should leave Dylan, she whispered to me as quietly as she could. I turned my head slightly and saw that her brothers were slowly taking steps backwards into the woods that we had just come from. Even though I knew she was right, something inside of me really wanted to stay here and watch what was going to happen to this man. Maybe I was just afraid for VIT and didn't want anything to happen to him. We were not friends by any means, but he has been kind to me, and even protected me before so I considered him a kind man and someone I didn't want to see anything happen to. As the thoughts were going through my head the man, Tristan, snarled, this whole **ing time, did you know? I couldn't understand what he was asking. Honestly, it seemed like he wasn't even really asking a question, or maybe it was something only VIT would understand since they seemed to know each other pretty well from their reactions. Finally, VIT took a small step forward and shook his head. No, I only just found out. I could tell that he was going to take another step closer to him, but Tristan let out another snarl. Liar. This time it was a bit harder to understand the one word because his teeth had started to grow into fangs in his human mouth and the word seemed almost too hard to pronounce. Ray had been quiet and I wasn't sure what she thought of the scene in front of us, but she seemed to be anxious to the point of being eager. Too bad I had no idea for what. She has been so different lately. There have been times where she leads, and times she forces me to deal with difficult situations on my own. I almost feel like there are things that she isn't telling me, but I just haven't figured out what it is. Ray, should we leave or do you think we should stay? I asked her quickly. Leaving was probably the last thing I wanted right now, but I wasn't sure if that was me or her and I needed to check. I waited for her to respond as I stood there watching still, but she didn't answer me. My frustration got the better of me and I softly growled in displeasure, but I hadn't realized that I did so out loud for all to hear. Everyone's heads whipped towards me in that moment and I instantly regretted making a noise because the looks on their faces were like different degrees of anger. My bad, I mumbled quickly as I tried to take a step back, but it was too late. The man named Tristan had refocused on me and now that he was partially shifted I could see how dangerous he looked. With my lack of experience with other wolves, I couldn't help but gawk at his partial transformation with sincere intrigue. I had never done this with Ray and I instantly wished to try it out soon. I would love to see what I looked like with her teeth in my mouth. But my thoughts of what that would look like vanished as Tristan's eyes glowed so bright that I could clearly see them even from where I stood. If he shifted now, I was sure that he would be on me in seconds, and he had stated that he was here for me after all. The moment he moved his foot, VIT launched himself across the space and headed straight for him. VIT was near Tristan so fast that I knew that he must be mid-shift as well. If he wasn't then he must train relentlessly to be able to move that fast. Do not do this now, he spoke as he stood blocking Tristan's way to me. With his back to me, all I could see was how his body was almost the same size as the stranger, with the stranger being an inch or so taller. Once his way to me was blocked, the twins and Lesia began urging me to leave, but with Ray basically ignoring me and this strange little feeling, I wasn't sure if I should. Dylan, he is distracted for now, but he might not stay that way. We need to get out of here now. One of the twins was saying from behind me as Lesia tried to pull my hand to follow, but I couldn't. I have alone for my whole life minus the few weeks that I have had with Lesia and her brothers. No one outside of the pack should know anything about me, so for him to say that he was here for me meant something. To me, it meant something. Why is he here for me? How does he even know anything about me? How does he know who I am? Does he know who I am? Even as I asked, I knew that they wouldn't have the answers I needed. The only one who would was the man currently being blocked by VIT, and I honestly had no idea which of them would win if they fought right now. This man, Tristan, had to be strong and intelligent for him to be able to get onto our pack lands without anyone else knowing. At that thought, I wondered how the hell VIT had come so quickly. Turning, I asked my friends, has an alarm sounded or did one of you call the guards? Lesia looked at her brothers and the pink on Nico's cheeks let me know that he had completely forgotten to call for help. Cruz on the other hand looked away quickly and I watched his jaw clench as I waited for his response. Cruz, how did VIT know to come here? I asked him directly. Without turning to look at me he replied, Aaron. Aaron, Lesia shrieked at him, what are you talking about? Why the F***ck would you call him? I truly had no words for him and I was glad that Lesia was the one who asked the question. She was about to keep yelling when he didn't respond right away, but he cut her off quickly. I didn't call him, he was here. And before you ask, I don't know why he was out here, but he was. He linked me right before the wolf appeared. He's the one who warned me and went to get help. We were all looking at him, but he was still looking away from me and I was glad. Glad that he felt guilty. Glad that he didn't turn to look at me and see the hurt on my face. Aaron was the last person I wanted to think about right now. I didn't even know if I would ever be ready to dissect all of my feelings about him. In the past few weeks I have seen so many different sides of him that it had almost made me forget how awful he has been to me my entire life. Today though, he reminded me of who he really is and let me know that I was an idiot for trying to see him for something more than that. What hurt the most was the feelings that came along with my confused thoughts. With the direction our little conversation had gone, I almost completely forgot about the situation taking place not more than 30 feet away from us. VIT and Tristan were still talking and I wanted nothing more than to walk over to them and find out what was really going on. Letting go of Lesia's hand, I turned to walk towards them. My temper was starting to get the better of me and I was losing control of my patience. Ray was finally paying attention to me and was now trying to get me to calm down. Too late. I yelled at her. It was too late for them because when I had finally decided that I was going to walk across the little clearing we were in, more guests appeared in almost the same place that VIT had emerged from before. This time, I didn't even try to hide the growl that left my mouth when I turned to see who had now joined us. Noel and Aaron came tumbling through the trees. Noel seemed to be holding Aaron up by the way that he had his arm draped over his shoulders. Both of the newcomers stilled at the sight before them and Ray was the only thing that kept me in place. While Noel looked at me in confusion, Aaron's eyes wouldn't leave my face at all. How dare he stare at me like that? I growled in his direction and I utterly enjoyed the look of dismay and shame on his face. Taking in his appearance also filled me with satisfaction because he looked like he had been beaten to hell. What is going on here? Noel asked as he slowly lowered Aaron to the ground next to him and he glanced from the two different groups across from him. Aaron looked a bit confused too, but I couldn't trust the expressions on his face just like I couldn't trust him. Nico came forward, but it was VIT who spoke, still with his back turned. Noel, I need you to get everyone out of here, now. Turning my attention to where VIT stood, I saw that Tristan had turned his attention to Noel and Aaron and was glancing back and forth between them and me. Why did she react like that towards them? Tristan asked awkwardly since his teeth still had not gone back to normal. Noel seemed shocked when the person half hidden behind VIT had spoken. Who the F***ck is this then? He asked loudly, and I knew he didn't care who answered him, as long as someone did. To my surprise, it was Aaron who spoke. That is the intruder I told you about. He showed up as a giant red wolf and was headed straight for Dylan. Since I can't shift, I went to get you to come help them. Wait, if Aaron had gone to get Noel, how did VIT know to show up when he did? I wanted to ask, but Noel wasn't done with his questions. Are you really here for the little miss? Noel asked Tristan. There is no way that he will let you take her. His words made Tristan shake so bad that I knew that he was trying his best to keep the shift from fully taking over. VIT was whispering to him, but it didn't seem like his words were placating Tristan. The shaking continued and I could see the glow in his eyes. It wouldn't be much longer before the shift took him and he was a wolf again. Noel spoke again. The nearest patrols will be here in less than 5 minutes. I don't know what's going on, but I encourage Ya to leave before the entire guard arrives. The look that VIT gave to Noel was quick and he gave him a curt nod before he turned back to Tristan. Leave now, do not ruin his plans, and do not come back here. She is safe. I promise on my life. Howls sounded in the distance, and I knew that they were close enough to sense that we were out here. Tristan looked around at all of us, but his gaze landed on me and stayed while he spoke. Do not begin to think you can keep me from her, but know that I will kill you if even a hair on her head is different when I see her next. Vincent. Was he talking about me? And if he was, why? I really didn't understand what the hell was going on here and I still had no idea who he was, but I saw that Tristan was stepping backwards into the trees and I knew he was about to leave. I had to stop him. I needed to know who he was and why he was here, and how he knew me. Wait, how do you know who I am? I yelled after him and the moment the words left my mouth he stopped walking. Tristan looked at VIT, then back to me. I will explain everything to you the next time we meet. I swear, he uttered before he took his last steps leading away back into the woods. We all stood watching the spot where he had vanished into the trees. No one moved or said anything for a few moments, until Noel called out. The patrol will be here soon and I am sure that no one wants them to know about what happened here tonight, right? I didn't turn to see the others' reactions. I was looking right at VIT who had finally turned around and was staring at me. He knew this man and why he was here, and I was not about to let him keep that from me. Before you ask, the answer is no. I cannot tell you anything more, he told me apologetically. Wrong answer. I forced Ray to shift right here in front of them all, snarled, and ran off into the woods leaving all of them there staring after me as I ran in the same direction Tristan had gone. 39. Aaron. From the moment we walked into the clearing my heart raced. Actually, it hadn't stopped racing from the moment I sensed the other wolf, but I forced myself to focus on reaching the only help I could think to find. Noel was not only my best option, he was my only option. I knew that he had a soft spot for Dylan and that he would do his best to try to help her in whatever way he could before having to call my uncle. We can't link without our wolves, so I begged Dane to stay with me as long as he could while I linked with Noel. Thankfully, Noel happened to be heading home and was much closer to the training grounds that I had been headed to. I told him where to meet and let him know that he wouldn't be able to link me and to just wait for me to arrive. The second I stopped taking I wasn't able to reach Dane again. F***ck, I muttered under my breath to myself. My uncle really did know how to ruin everything, didn't he? I'm sure if he could see me right now he would be beyond pleased. That sadistic **ck. One day, I swear I will pay him back for everything he's done. I needed to shake off those thoughts right now. All I had was my physical strength and I needed to use every ounce of it to help Dylan and the Silveras. Getting to Noel and back to them as quick as I could needed to be my only priority. Running was out of the question, so I was reduced to a quick trot. Repeating to myself that I was almost there helped me mentally push myself and in turn force my body to keep moving. As soon as I approached the training grounds, I saw someone move out of the shadow of the building and felt my entire body ease a bit when I registered that it was Noel. By the gods, what the F***ck happened to ya boy? Noel asked confused. Why didn't he heal ya? There was no time to explain to him why Mark couldn't heal me any more than he did. Dylan was my main priority right now. Don't worry about me. I need your help right now. Follow me. I'll explain on the way. Noel chucked his teeth at me. Follow ya? I can hardly believe ya even got here. Seems I'll have to carry ya to wherever ya need to take me. Pissed that he was probably right I sighed. Fine old man, help me and I'll show you where they are. The look he gave me would have been funny if I wasn't in a hurry. Them? Who's them? You said you need my help. He walked closer to me and I thought that he was about to scoop me up in his arms like a child. Backing away I looked at him in turn. Do you mean to carry me like a child? Laughing he swung him arm under one arm and grabbed onto my opposite shoulder. As funny as that would be, I doubt you'd come willingly boy. Now off we go. Who is the them you are referring to? Wrapping my arm around his shoulder and grabbing his shoulder worked well and we started to head off in the direction of the coastline. Once we were in the tress I spoke to him as quickly as I could. It wasn't easy to keep up with the pace he was trying to set for us. The Silveras and Dylan were headed to the beach and I caught the scent of an outsider. A strange wolf was in the area near them. I can't reach Dane right now so I came to get you. He was quiet for a few steps as if contemplating my words and the first question out of his mouth caught me off guard for a moment. What did he use on you to keep you away from Dane? Well damn. How he had come to the conclusion that my uncle was the reason that I couldn't reach Dane right now I wasn't sure, but he was right and I knew that if I didn't answer him, he wouldn't let it go. I don't know, I answered truthfully. Mark wasn't in the mood for giving any explanations and I wasn't in the mood to wait around either. There was a sudden increase in our speed and I was huffing and puffing much louder than I liked, but if this was the only way that I could get someone over to help them I would do it. Noelle didn't ask any other questions for a while and I was going mad with the silence. Do you think that we should call the patrols or guards? I asked him quickly. What if I had been mistaken and there wasn't just one intruder, but multiple? Having no idea what we might be walking into, I worried for her. I had no idea how she would deal with something like this, especially after what happened to her this morning. My thoughts were consumed of images of her from not only today, but any time I'd seen her. Images of her laughing, crying, shifting, and everything in between swam around my mind. Noelle's soft response pulled me back to reality. No, we need to find out what is going on before calling anyone. If there are more than the one you detected, I will call VIT or Mark, but no others. The more I thought of it, I knew he was right. If we called anyone else, they would immediately call for additional guards and would probably link my uncle to let him know what was going on. Odd that we haven't heard any warnings or alarms yet, but I hoped that maybe, just maybe, my uncle was off the Packlands and had no idea what was going on right now. If the gods truly existed, I prayed that this is why neither of us had heard anything yet. Having to walk this way was easier, but too much longer than I liked, and I could tell that Noelle was a little anxious about the situation that we were heading towards. We walked like this for what felt like a good 20 minutes when he spoke again, but this time it wasn't a question, and more like a demand. You need to leave this pack. If you do not, he will end up killing you. He is only keeping you around for the time being, but I'm not sure how much longer he will need you. Even though his words were ones that I have thought myself, multiple times, it was hard to hear them. Outside this pack I had nothing. I was nothing. No family, no friends, no pack. What was a wolf with no pack? I've heard stories of lone wolves who lose their minds because they have no bond to tie them to others or another. Wolves are pack animals because that is how we thrive. We need our fellow wolves almost as much as we need our mates. The thought of leaving this horrible life filled me with as much sorrow as it did joy. I held a secret wish inside that maybe one day I would be able to leave here, just not alone, but right now I wasn't ready to look at that hidden part of my heart. Noelle kept walking and didn't seem to expect a response from me. He knew just as well as I did that there was nothing to say in this regard, and he was essentially right. In fact, he was one of my uncle's personal guards and he probably knew the D*CK much better than I ever would. I'm sure that he was saying this because he believed it to be true. One thing did cross my mind while we continued our walk to the unknown. Noelle had always taken extra care to watch out for me, but I had never asked him why. Probably because I was afraid that he would tell me that my uncle had asked that of him. Tossing the question around in my head, I debated on whether I wanted to go there with him right now. Would his answer change the way that I felt about him, or the way that he interacted with me? Afraid of what changes may come from either of us depending on his answer, I decided against it for now. The fact of the matter was that I knew that I had someone that I could rely on, especially in a situation like this. When we were closer to the spot I knew they would be in, Noelle let me know that he was going to link up with the patrol captain and find out where exactly that they were so that we would know how much time we would have before they found us. I looked up at his eyes and watched as they took on that hazy shimmer that everyone gets when they are linking with another wolf. It was always interesting to see the way our eyes looked when that happened. A minute or so later the haze vanished almost immediately. There is only one patrol in the area tonight since it's a new moon and we have about 10 minutes until they will be in this area. Both of us quickened our strides and I could have sworn that I could hear my heart pounding relentlessly. Closer now, I was sure that I could hear multiple voices coming from not much farther away. I didn't know it was nerves or fear, but I suddenly remembered what happened this morning and I felt my stomach doing flips. Are you sure that you should be seeing Dylan right now? I thought that something happened between the two of you this morning. My response to him came out quicker than I would have liked. Unlike this morning, I am choosing to be here and to help her. The words stung as they left my mouth. I had no choices in this life. My life was hardly my own, but for whatever it's worth, I will keep her from as much pain and sorrow as I can, even if I am the one forced to inflict it upon her. I could feel Noelle's gaze digging into my soul as he looked not just at me, but through me, and when he found whatever it was he was looking for, he slowly turned his head and faced the direction we were headed. Curiosity burned in my heart and I wanted to ask him what he saw when he looked at me like that. Too bad I knew what he saw when he looked at me. He saw what I saw every time I looked in the mirror. Nothing. About 10 feet from the clearing, I could not only make out the voices from before, but I was beginning to see that there were two different groups ahead of us. Continuing our pace, we reached the clearing and broke through the line of trees in time to see what looked like an argument between Dylan and Cruz and an argument between VIT and I assumed the stranger. Seeing VIT eased my nerves a bit, but when I took in the man in front of him, whatever comfort I had felt, immediately vanished. The stranger was taller than VIT and was just as large as he was, but he had a mop of messy red hair on top of his head. But that wasn't all, he looked as though he was about to rip VIT in half. When I looked back to Dylan, I was shocked into complete silence when I heard her growl in my direction. As if that wasn't bad enough, the stranger by VIT seemed to be enraged by it as well. Noelle quietly muttered to me, "I'm gonna set you down now, boy, but if I were you, I would try to stay as quiet as possible. She looks like she wants to rip your head off." Lowering me down to the ground, I listened to his words and sat there hardly moving and definitely not speaking, but I couldn't look away from her. Even though I knew that I was probably the last person that she wanted to see right now, I was so glad that she was okay. As I sat there practically gawking at her, I started to feel Dane waking. Dane, are you there? Are you back now? I asked him quietly while sitting near motionless on the ground by the tree Noel dumped me by. He didn't respond to me, but I could feel his presence, and with it I could feel my strength slowly returning. Noel, VIT, and the man in front of him were now all talking, but I couldn't focus on anything other than her. Hell could have frozen over, the moon and sun could have collided in the sky above us, and nothing could have made me look anywhere else but at her. Except for when I heard then. Did he say that he had come for Dylan? It wasn't just me that heard that. Dane seemed furious by those words. I was trying to wrap my head around Noel's question, but when he answered his own question, those words cut like glass. He'll never let you take her. Even though I knew he wasn't talking to the stranger, each word seemed to mark my soul. It was as if he was talking directly to me. I just sat there watching and somewhat listening and trying to keep my mouth shut, but I was on edge now. If my uncle finds out about this, I can't imagine what he would do to Dylan, or any of us for that matter. But my eyes never left her. I watched her as she watched them. Watched VIT and the man behind him, and I saw it. I saw the moment she lost her composure and the moment that she decided that she was done with everyone else making decisions for her. Gods, she was beautiful and powerful, and the second that she shifted into that sleek red wolf, Dane pushed forward. He decided that he would follow her anywhere. And so we did. I sprung up from the ground and shifted in seconds, and we were already on the run before I heard what the others were planning on doing. Dylan did exactly what I knew that she was going to do. She ran right into the woods after the larger auburn wolf, and Dane was right on her tail. Dane stayed close enough to keep her safe, but not too close that her wolf would turn and attack. The other wolf was gone. I couldn't even smell him. How can he be that fast? Dane asked me as he followed Dylan's wolf. I wasn't sure, so I didn't even bother to answer him. Focus, we just needed to focus on Dylan and make sure that he was the only other wolf that entered our pack lands. The words from earlier ran through my head, he's here for her. They meant Dylan, and I knew it. Whoever he was, he had managed to sneak unseen onto the largest wolf pack's land unseen and undetected. If they could do that, who knew what else they were capable of? I followed her all the way to the edge of the northern border where the mountain range began. Dylan's wolf stopped short of the foot of the hillside. Pacing back and forth, she searched for his scent, and I watched her from a few yards away. Searching, she was searching for him, and as I watched I could feel the despair taking over. Whatever she was hoping to achieve or find seemed to be slipping away from her. Dane wanted to go to her, he ached to be nearer to her, and I could feel his desire rising up in him, or us. F***ck, I couldn't tell the difference. She was gorgeous, even in this form, and neither I nor Dane could stop from going to her, to getting closer to her. As soon as we were within a few feet of her, Dylan's large wolf turned towards us, and the snarl she let out was both one of the most terrifying and sensual sounds I've ever heard. Dylan's wolf cocked her head to the side as she prowled closer to Dane, and he lowered his head slightly in submission to her, but stood to his full height. Shift so we can talk to her, I demanded of Dane. Even though he wanted to be close to her, his desire to keep her safe was winning out, and he was about to shift when we both heard a voice in our minds. Are you here to hurt her some more, Aaron Blura? 40. Dylan. The dark powerful wolf standing in front of us looked similar to what I remembered, but also much different. I wasn't sure if it was that my mind had built him up in my thoughts and memories, or if there was something wrong with him. Even though he stood just as tall as Ray did, and there were many, many shiny little scars on his body that were visible as he breathed. I was in Ray's head right now, but I had no idea what to do in this moment. My mind was trying to figure out how the man named Tristan had gotten away from us so quickly. Ray was running all out, and for a moment, he was just out of our reach, but it was like the moment that he reached the foot of the mountain he vanished into thin air. And not just his physical body, but his scent as well. It was completely gone. Too confused to really feel anything else, I wasn't paying much attention to what Ray was saying or doing, but I was somewhat aware of who was standing before her. That wolf has ran through my head so many times now that there is no way that I could ever forget him waking or dreaming. Earlier, when I lost my temper and shifted to chase after Tristan, I was determined to ask him all the questions that were going through my mind, but now, it seemed that the fire that had momentarily been lit inside of me was fizzling out. If it wasn't obvious by the diminished adrenaline pulsing through Ray, then it was becoming extremely apparent by the doubt that was now creeping in my mind. What did I just do? Why did I shift in front of so many people? How far was the patrol? Did they possibly see me? Did Tristan turn back and see Ray trailing him? Ray was obviously focused on whatever she was planning on doing with him, but she made sure that she spoke softly to me to try and calm my racing thoughts. Calm down, little one, there is nothing to fret over just yet. Right, she was right. I mean, we were originally planning on coming out to the coast to try shifting in front of Lesia and her brothers so that they could meet Ray and see if their wolves could link with her also. Plus, it's not like VIT and Noel haven't already seen Ray on the rare times that they were with Alpha Rogan and I had to shift in front of them. That only left Aaron and Tristan. While I was worried about Tristan seeing Ray, especially since I knew nothing about him, where he came from, and why he was there for me, I was the one who ended up running after him. Leaving Aaron for last was easy. There was no reason why I couldn't shift in front of him. He's seen Ray before, and even stood before her in the woods and spoke to her, so there was really no need to hide from him either. Still perplexed with Tristan's vanishing act, I tried to force my mind to think logically and figure out what could have happened to him. Ray snarled at the wolf in front of us and I watched as he quickly reacted to her, but not in the way that I had expected him. The tall proud wolf quickly lowered his head towards her as a clear sign of submission, and I could feel how much she enjoyed his response. As he moved, Rey gnashed her teeth, and I could feel how much she wished to lunge forward and attack him, to just bite down and rip and tear at him, but she held herself back. When Rey spoke to Aaron's wolf, I couldn't help but stop myself from thinking about anything else and give my full attention to them. This was honestly the perfect opportunity to see if they could link with us just like Lesia had. If I was in my human form, I would have been holding my breath as I anxiously waited for confirmation, but since we were in Rey's form right now, that was something I didn't have to worry about. Rey on the other hand seemed just as curious. Head still cocked to the side, Rey watched him in anticipation of his response both to her question and to her attempting to link with him. Aaron's wolf, who was still standing a few paces away from Rey, seemed to have frozen in place. I stared at him because for a moment I was sure that he was the one who wasn't breathing, and I watched to see if there was a rise and fall of his chest. Suddenly, Aaron's wolf shook his head back and forth quickly as if it was trying to shake something off of itself, and then, if that wasn't odd enough, he sat on his haunches and lowered his head. "Do you think he heard you, or do you think something is wrong with him?" I asked Rey in confusion. I mean, there was really no way of knowing if he did or didn't unless he either linked back with Rey or he shifted and we were able to speak to Aaron. Though I was honestly considering that this might have to happen, there were two conflicting thoughts running through my head about that. One, I really did not want to see Aaron's stupid face right now. I didn't want to see him pretend to be sorry and sad about what happened at school. The other was that if he did shift right now, he would again have to stand in front of us completely naked. While the thought was unnerving, it was also a little appealing. Ugh, what was wrong with me? I thought more to myself than anything, and was about to get lost in thought again when I heard, "Did you just speak? How? How is possible for you to speak to me like this?" Whoa, the voice that filled my ears was so, well, captivating, that I urged Rey to speak to him again so that we could hear it. Rey was still standing, but I felt her desire to walk over to the wolf. Why? I truly didn't know why, but I could feel the desire building inside of her. "Answer my question, Aaron," Rey said softly, and this time Aaron's wolf reacted immediately. The dark brown wolf quickly stood up, and then kneeled down before us. Watching through Rey's eyes was the best thing that could happen right now, because I would not have known how to react in this situation. "No, my human would never hurt Dylan or you, and my name is Dane. You can call me Dane if you would like. May I ask your name?" Gods, I wished that I could hear Rey's thoughts right now. I really wanted to know if Dane's voice was having the same kind of effect on her that it was having on me. Watching this wolf lower himself on the ground before Rey, or us, or whatever was something new, odd, but new, and a little exciting if I was being honest. "Do not lie to me, Dane. If your human didn't wish to harm Dylan, then why did he have you follow us out here?" Rey asked him firmly. Thank the gods that she was able to think logically enough to process this situation and navigate it the way she was. She had every reason to attack Dane and Aaron, but was using this time to get information from him. "No, we did not follow you to harm you. We came to make sure that no harm came to Dylan or to you." Rey started to slowly pace back and forth in front of Dane, who was still kneeling on the ground, but she was keeping her thoughts hidden from me. She didn't stop her pacing when she said, "You said that your human would never hurt either Dylan or myself. Are you not aware of the things that he has done to her in the past?" Dane growled softly and this time didn't answer as quickly as he previously had. His teeth were showing how hard his jaws were clenched as he growled again and I realized that he must be talking to Aaron. "Are you trying to figure out how to answer me, or how to lie?" Dylan demanded suddenly. She had stopped walking and now standing much closer to Dane. With so little distance between us now, it was easier to see Dane's scared body. From here we were able to see that there were both new and old scars on different parts of his body. Unsure of what could have happened for him to be unable to fully heal from his wounds, I again caught myself feeling bad for him. When Dane spoke, I forgot about his body, the scars, and even Tristan. All I could think about was if there was a way for us to prove what he had said. "Aaron does not wish for me to tell you this, but he has never wanted to hurt Dylan and has only ever done it because he was forced to." Looking at Dane, still lowered on the ground, I wanted to go over to him and beat the truth out of him. What was he talking about? Why would he say something like that? Was he only saying this because he was speaking to Rey? Rey growled and took a step closer to Dane's lowered body. Unsure of what she was thinking, I truly had no idea what she was going to do to him, but I didn't question her. If there was anyone in this world who knew about all of the things that I have gone through in my life, it would be Rey, and I knew that she would do whatever she had to do to protect me, but I was a little afraid of how she would react to this. "Do you take me for a fool, Dane? How could anyone make him do those things to her? Or rather, should I be asking who would make him do those things? Wow, I hadn't even thought of that. Could there really be someone out there who had been forcing Aaron to treat me the way that he did? No, that couldn't be true. If it was, then why had he acted different with me on those few occasions when it was just the two of us, or when he had come over with the others to my house? Something didn't make sense and I wasn't sure how to figure it out or who we could even confirm this information with. Rey and I waited for his response, and I could see that Dane seemed to be visibly uncomfortable. He was snapping softly and grinding his teeth and softly growling, and I was almost sure this time that he was talking to Aaron. And that is a really big if. If someone was truly manipulating him, how had they done it, and why? What could they honestly get out of this? I cannot tell you who, but I think that you can see the how. When Dane spoke to us, my eyes immediately ran over his body, and this time I felt Rey slowly observing every inch of him from tail to nose. The fact that there was no moonlight didn't help us in being able to completely see Dane's body, but as was took it in, he said, "This is what we couldn't heal." I felt a shudder run through Ray and I wished that she would let me into her thoughts. Did she believe him? I mean, could we believe him? Who could confirm that he was being hurt or abused or forced into doing something like that? As I continued to think about his words, I thought through his friends and considered who could have that type of control over him without Alpha Rogan knowing or being aware of it. The moment that I thought his name, I felt Ray stiffen. No, there's no way that she thinks that he could be in on it, or allow someone else to control, manipulate, and possibly even torture his own nephew. But the more that I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt because I could see Alpha Rogan doing just that. No one knew the type of person that he truly was underneath the nice clothes and performance that he put on for everyone else to see. It's true. There was absolutely nothing that went on in this pack that man didn't know about, and with Aaron being his nephew, there was no way that he didn't know what was happening to him. New memories filled my mind, and they were not pleasant. I was recalling all of the times that Alpha Rogan had hurt me for one thing or another even when it wasn't my fault or had nothing to do with me. Too many things were starting to make sense, and instead of helping the situation, it was only making it worse. Not only was the one person who could probably corroborate this story the last person I wanted to talk to, I wasn't sure what might happen if he found out that I knew about this. What didn't make sense, besides all of it, was why he would let someone force Aaron to do this to me. There was no benefit that I could think of that anyone could get from harassing me my entire life. Ray was listening to me, and spoke again to Dane. "Does Rogan know about this?" Rogan? Had she always referred to the Alpha by his first name like that, or was it just because of who she was talking to? Dane spoke so quickly that I could see the frenzy in his eyes. "Do not let Dylan ask him anything about this, or Aaron, or anything really. She needs to stay as far away from him as she can." Back up on his feet, Dane was actually shaking as he stood to his full height. He seemed to want to say more, but either couldn't or was being told by Aaron that he shouldn't. "Leave," he suddenly yelled so frantically that I wanted Ray to look around the area and see if there was a threat that may be approaching her. When Ray didn't say anything, he yelled again, and you could see the fear in him. As he stood there, his posture changed as if he was preparing for some type of physical attack. "Take Dylan far from here. Take her somewhere safe." I do not know why he does the things he does, but I know that he is a calculating man and he must have something planned for her. She will not be safe if she stays here much longer. A soft whine came from him when he finished speaking, but his words, even though they didn't carry anything in them except concern and warning, seemed to anger Ray more than she already was. I felt so confused because nothing was making much sense. Why would they do these things to me? Nothing made sense, but the fact that even though his voice was beyond soothing, all it did was say things that hurt and made my situation seem worse than it was. "Do not take me for a fool. Your boy knows more than you are saying. How can I be sure that he is not protecting that man? He knows that there is nowhere that Dylan can be free of him, just like you know the same goes for him, don't you?" I didn't want to hear this any longer. All I wanted was to go home and pretend like this whole day didn't happen. Half-heartedly urging Ray to leave was all that I could muster. Unable to look at Dane, or the trees, or the sky, I just retreated to the parts of my mind that didn't hurt. Ray must have sensed my despair because I felt her opening up her thoughts and emotions to me. Anger, resentment, fear, and desire were some of what I glimpsed from her, and I didn't even care enough to look any further. If there was no life for me, here or anywhere, what was the point of my existence? "Little one," she called out to me, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. Without me, Ray could stay in this form and leave. She could be done with the hiding and the lies, and this pack. Everyone would be better off without me, so there was no real point in trying anymore. I just shut it off. I shut it all off, and the last thing I remembered before I finally let go was Aaron's eyes full of tears, a small gray wolf, and two golden wolves standing right beside him.